Welcome, everyone. We are here today live on our 2020 Call for Code Global Challenges, and we are going to spend some time talking about our starter kits. We've got a number of starter kits that you can help build with, take your solution and take our code, put it together, build something amazing. Before we get started today on our remote education starter kit theme, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes with you to describe what a starter kit is, and then we'll get into it with the team. So what is a starter kit? With Call for Code, we wanted to get you going fast. And so a starter kit is a problem statement, a set of resources and technologies that you can build your project with on top of. It's We went out, we talked to some experts, we interviewed them, we started to think about how we would build a solution. And the team came together, came up with a set of ideas. We created an architecture diagram. We wrote some tutorials, and the tutorials have instructions, step by step, screenshots, how to wire it all together, how you can build with IBM Cloud and a set of technologies to really make your COVID-19 challenge project come to life. So what we're going to do next is introduce you to some of the starter kits. And remember, there are two challenges this year in 2020. We've got our climate change challenge, but we're not going to talk about our three starter kits here. We're going to actually spend some time today talking about the COVID-19 Grand Challenge. We've got three of them. So crisis communications, remote education, and community cooperation. In this stream, we're going to spend our time talking about remote education. So now what would you think about with remote education? Well, many of us are home with our children. They're all doing remote learning, maybe for the first time. In my house, I've got two home from college, two from high school. Some of the professors and educators have jumped right in. They're, using Zoom. They've got global Google Classroom. They've got a set of technologies, and they're up and running. Some educators still kind of coming up that learning curve and need some help. And so we decided in this starter kit that we would give some resources, build some resources for that educator to help them improve their remote education experience. And so we've got a couple of microservices here that we think are really clever. We wanted to build a transcription service. So you as an educator record your lecture. You want to give the minutes to your students as classroom study notes. And so we've created a video transcription. You upload the video to IBM Cloud. We use speech to text and give you back a transcript. And then we know that we want to quiz our students. How are they doing? Are they learning in this new normal? And so we built ourselves a quiz application, and we'll show you how we did that. And then, of course, we've been using virtual classrooms. And so IBM, as part of our online delivery, has built a skills network, the IBM Skills Network. You could come learn about our technologies. We decided that would be a great way for you as an educator to use the same set of tools, open source. In this case, we've stripped out the IBM content. You have to bring your content to the virtual classroom, but we give you Open edX and Big Blue Button in a container running on IBM Cloud, and so a great way to get started. So let's get some introductions here. We want you to join the fight, of course, on the COVID-19 challenges. And so I'm going to introduce Derek Tay, and Derek is going to introduce the team that built the starter kits, but we're going to find all of the code for our starter kits in open source. Remember, we want you to take our code and build something amazing with it in your project. So jump up to github.com/call-for-code. And in each of these repositories, you can find all the source code that might be helpful. So jump in there and take advantage of it. When you visit developer.ibm.com/call-for-code, you'll find a whole set of technical resources and technologies that you can build into your solutions for your submission. We've got a set of challenges around COVID-19. Jump down to the starter kits, and today we're going to drill down into the remote education category. But with that, and Derek is going to introduce the team and then take it away from there.
Hey, thanks, John. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. My name is Derek T.A. I'm going to go over here a couple things, kind of introduce the team of who worked on this. This was something that we really were passionate about doing. We put this together in a pretty quick manner. And I want to kind of share the team here with you a little bit. I'm just sharing my screen here. Give me 1 second. And there we go. So I hope everyone can see this. So this is me, probably a little small. Let me increase the size here. So I'm Derek T. I'm a developer advocate as well. There's a lot of stuff that I work on with Call for Code and code and response. But I helped lead the effort on remote education in light of COVID-19. But I did not do this alone. Had some great help along the way. Dan Cunnington, who's also worked on this project, he and Pedro Cruz worked on the video transcription side of things. So they're going to go through and talk about their solution as well. And then Spencer, who's behind the scenes here, actually helping to produce this, he created a quiz app that allows people using a loopback app to create something easy that can be used for quizzing, whether you want to quiz your students or you want them to build something. It's a really pretty cool solution that we have here for you. As John also mentioned, all of this is available in our Call for Code repository. All open source. If there's anything here that you see that can be improved or fixed or anything, please go through and submit a pull request, and we'll happily go through and correct that or open an issue. It's important that we keep this up to date and accurate and working. So please feel free to do that. I will go through briefly here what we have on our remote education side. I'll talk a little bit about why we wanted to create it and kind of show the architectural diagrams of the solution we have, and then I'm going to hand it over to actually go through this stuff live. So as John pointed out, developer.ibm.com/call-for-code. And when you land there, you'll eventually get to the remote education page, but you'll see also the track for COVID-19 as well as our climate change track. You can say use our starter kits, and our starter kit here is the one on remote education. And so why did we create something for remote education? Well, I think it's pretty simple. There's been quite a shift in education with COVID-19 and with schools that have to now take their classrooms online. And some schools are just not prepared for that. And so we wanted to do what we can to help to provide some tools to educators, to their students, to be able to come up with workable solutions and just some cool technology that they can use to help their classroom and their students. So please read a little bit more about this on here if you'd like. I don't want to read it to you. You guys are quite capable of doing that. So just to show a little bit of the architecture behind these ideas, the idea that Spencer built around this quiz app, it's pretty awesome. If you're not familiar with Loopback, Spencer's going to take you through that and show you how easy it is to generate Loopback code to drive your app via API models and stuff. It's really, really pretty cool stuff. So we'll kind of go through that with you there. And the speech to text app is pretty useful as well. The idea behind that was you might have educators that have video content already, but not everyone learns best via video content or audio. Some people like to have a transcription in front of them to learn a little bit better, maybe be able to reference. So this is a Python Flask web app that takes a video processes the text from the video, processes the speech from the video, and then uses Watson speech to text to take that audio and turn it into a transcription for people. So it saves educators time from having to type up their lesson. They can just pull right from the video of what they're saying already, with the option to then extend that further using Watson translation. So if you have students that prefer to learn in a different language, you can take the text that was generated, pop it through Watson translation, and have something there as well. So those are pretty cool things. And if you want to get started with them or follow along and build them on your own, with us here, the tutorials are right below here. So when you click onto the tutorial, it'll bring you to a full tutorial page that explains, step by step how this works, which, like I said, Spencer and the rest of the team will take us through their stuff here. But it's very easy to learn this on your own if it's something you want to do, or to create on top of it. This gives you a really good base to start with. So I think that you guys will find this useful. And I'm going to turn this back over to John, if you had anything more that you wanted to add before we pass this over to Spencer. I didn't know if you had more to talk about with Call for Code or getting involved or anything like that.
No, I what I want to say here is what a great team came up with some really brilliant ideas that you can use in your solution. So don't think of a starter kit as the end result. It's really a resource that you can take and put and incorporate into your project. I just encourage everyone, if you're watching in April, we've got an opportunity to really make a difference with COVID-19. And so there's an accelerated timeline. So April 27th, if you submit before April 27th, in the first round of judging, we're going to grab the first 3 and we're going to make them part of the code and response effort to really accelerate the deployment of a solution, of those 3 solutions. Now you still have time, because you can submit for the regular call for code that runs all the way through July 31st. And so you still have a great opportunity to win that $200,000. But we want you to help us make a difference early in the COVID-19 pandemic. So April 27th. Derek, take it away.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. I think now, Spencer, if you're good, we're going to pass this over to you to talk about the quiz app that you created and kind of walk through some of that. So if you're ready, feel free to take over here.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to do it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, John. Thanks for that great intro. I'll try to keep my voice roughly where yours is for the headphones users in the chat. If you do have to turn it up, that's, we understand. We'll try not to be, we'll try not to make too much noise on the headphones. So what I'm gonna do is I guess this, and let me know if you can see this okay.
Yeah, I can see your terminal.
Oh shoot. So we can either have our faces or my screen, but not both.
So I think your screen's a little more important. We can always switch back to our faces at another point.
Sure, folks. Well, what we've got here is the GitHub repo for the Call for Code COVID-19 test application. Basically, when you look at, as was discussed earlier, Call for Code is a distributed hackathon. And the thing about hackathons is sometimes people are ready to go right away, and sometimes people need a little help. And so what we've created is a set of starter kits, both for traditional Call for Code as well as the COVID-19 specific arm of Call for Code. As was discussed, we have a couple different broad headlines of different sections to work on for COVID-19. And then specifically, we built, inside the education section, we built this quiz application. Is this quiz application revolutionary? No. Is it better than Moodle? No. But sometimes people need just a little kernel of a functional application that they can then take and hack on, and as a result, go build something interesting. Back when I was talking about what I wanted to build here and why I wanted to build it, the thing is that pretty much every student has some kind of distance learning situation, probably more than one, right? The thing is, with these giant applications, they're very difficult to write. There's translations as a problem. Data privacy is a problem. It's super difficult. Why did you stop sharing? Can you share again?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 1 second. I apologize. There we go.
Thanks. Okay. Anyways, the point is that pretty much everyone has some kind of distance learning solution, but there might be little holes or very specific challenges that people who are in that world of distance learning might be able to identify. So I took the example of, sure, we have Blackboard, sure, we have Moodle, sure, we have Google Classroom, but there's a specific type of quiz that we can or cannot do, and I wrote a little simple application around that. I believe this will work. Oh, this is the web starter. This is not the application itself. So that's something for us to learn as we go forward. I assume this is also not working. Yeah, that's too bad. We'll get it working. A simple application. The core of this, if we go down to the architecture diagram, womp womp. I wonder how I blew that. Anyways, it's not a very complicated application. There's a technology called Loopback. Loopback creates an API. Then from the Loopback API, we'll build a quiz. And the quiz is pretty simple. So if I come over here and I git clone the software, I should be able to pretty quickly bring this thing up. npm install, if you're not familiar with npm, it's just a JavaScript packaging format and framework. Thanks, Akar. We're always happy to have large font on this format. All right, now that that's installed, it might work with just an npm start. That's not this thing's fault. We got a couple. I was kind of banging on it last night. So I had the port in use already. It says the port is already in use. This is a good opportunity to mess with Linux a little bit. So this is the process that has that port open. So we can do a kill sh9 that thing. Now we can see in LSOF that the socket is not in use. Start the application. Localhost 3030 isn't what we're actually going to use for this because it's not running on my localhost at all, but that's okay. If you go to the root, you get just like some data import. And the important part of this application really is the loopback. Loopback is a micro framework. Well, micro framework's a bad example. It's a small tool. It's a small tool that builds simple CRUD database software. And then you can write a relatively simple front end, which in this case is in React. But that's not the important part. The important part is we have this Explorer that lets us look directly at the data inside our database. And we can do that by just look at this API. All of a sudden, we have an HTTP-based API that lets us manage things like questions. And I don't think I have time to show you on the stream, but I promise you it was very simple to get there. Yeah, here's the we'll do this. We'll run literally try it out, and we can attempt to make HTTP requests against our application live inside this little explorer. Was this an error? No, this was not an error. Oh, because we have no data. So what we can do is we can create a question. If you're not familiar with the Swagger UI Explorer, it's really cool. Swagger is a specification for APIs. And then this is just a little front-end toy that lets us play with it. And if you're a fan of our stream, you've seen me play with curl many times before. What we're doing here is we're just saying, let's make a question, a couple answers. So the question can be like, when does call for code close for submissions? Derek, what's the actual answer on that?
July 31st.
July 31st?
Yep.
So we'll say July 31, March 10th, which would be pretty funny because it's past. And we'll say December 31st. And we'll say May 1. Why not? And then the correct answer index is 0. I do apologize for setting the correct answer index to be 0 indexed. I'm sure that will cause no problems to anyone. We can literally run try it out. It will echo the curl. That is, say we wanted to run this on the command line. We could totally run this on the command line. It'll give us a response body. It gives us a response code, which is 200, which is HTTP for everything went pretty well. And then some headers, which means that if we go back to the get section and we run try it out, we can see all the questions that we made. We can also copy and paste this curl and run it on the command line, which isn't too bad. We can also come in here and create a quiz. And again, we're doing pretty well. We can solve this, the call for code. Oh.
So you're going to test us, Spencer, on some of our knowledge of call for code.
Maybe. We'll see. I also want to make 2 quizzes, actually. I want to make Derek call for code quiz 2. Pass percentage. And you see it ran. And then I'm going to make 1 more quiz question just for fun.
Now you realize math teachers are going to have no trouble starting with zero-based counting, but imagine all of those remote educators out there that are social studies and English and telling them to start to count from 0.
Well, I try not to be super negative at people who don't gravitate towards STEM fields. Honestly, like, it is easy to dunk on. It's easy to make cheap jokes at social science majors and whoever. People didn't go to college, but it doesn't feel too good inside my soul. But yes, the 0 indexing, I literally have a demo of this app where I messed up the questions on the 0 indexing. So I made that mistake as well. What is the grand prize for call for code? Does anyone know what the grand prize for call for code is? Is it $10?
One of the grand prizes is $200,000.
It's $200,000. $2,000. $20,000.
Third place is, yeah.
And then 200. Man, that's a lot of dollars. How much do you get after taxes? Does anyone know? None, probably. At that point, you're a 1%er. So, all right. So we got some questions. If we come in here to question, and we just run this get command, we get all these questions. Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh, I need to put the -s in front of curl. Oops. We can see we made some questions, right? The UI, I'm just not super sure I can promise it's going to work, fam, but we can try it. What you do is you come in here to front end. Well, I think you can just say examples. So CP examples data. Okay, yeah. Whoops. PS-EF. Okay. Foreground. Control C. CP examples data.db. CP examples. All right. Oops. What did that do? That copied the example data that I pre-created for you and the example React compiled code into the front end directory. That public directory is served by Express, but it's compiled React from this directory. And you have to run something like npm run build in here, which is going to fail because I didn't set up anything. But I promise that will work. And then now we can run npm start. Fingers crossed to the demo gods. And we can come up here. The Explorer still works, I think. And if we run get questions, we can actually see a bunch of questions that I made earlier in time because it's example data. And if we go to /index.html, you can see the example quiz application, which is kind of a cool little toy. The point of this, again, is not really the front end. Yay, you win. The point is the idea is the power of loopback. And to show you the power of loopback super, super quickly, what we're going to do is we're going to extend this application. Do I have loopback installed? Okay, so I do. So I can do loopback model. And this is the last thing I'm going to show, and then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to go to the other applications. But if we just want to make it a thing, we could say something like, we're just literally creating database schema right now. So the model name might be score, or you know, it could be student, it could be score, it could say test result. The database, in this case, we're going to use the memory-based database, but the beauty of using a framework like this is it's really easy to hook up to cloud databases, like on, for instance, the IBM cloud. Persistent model is fine. Expose it for the REST API, yes. Custom plural. Test results. Common. So the property, now we're putting basically rows in our database. So we might say like student ID. And we'll say this is a number. Required? Yes. And then student name. And say this is a string. Required? Yes. Default value? Nothing. And then we might say something like date. And there's like a natural date object, which is going to translate, for instance, in Postgres to a very specific type of database. A default value, nothing. And then probably score itself. We'll say this is a... Should we say this is a number? Yeah, I guess it's a number, right? Because it's going to be like 0.8.
Are we doing pass fail?
Well, I think we're going to store a Boolean called passed failed. But yeah, default value is nothing. And then we can say property is pass fail. And then we'll say Boolean. And we'll say yes. And we'll say default is true. Because that way students by default pass the test. All right, and that's literally all we had to do.
This was magic to me when you showed me this, Spencer. I thought this was really cool.
Yeah, and I worry that people might not have. Well, we'll run npm start. Okay, the app has not changed, but the Explorer has. So now all of a sudden I have this test result opportunity that I can get in here with. And we can get test results. We should have no test results. Oh. We're actually getting a... We're actually getting an error from our generated code. That's weird.
Fun to live demos, right, Spencer?
Fun with live demos. The point being that maybe that's just because we haven't populated it yet. I guess we can try submitting something. So student ID, yeah, 10. Student name, Spencer. The date seems fine. My score is an 80. Oh, I should have probably had a total score on the quiz, right? Not just a random number. I was thinking this would be 0.8. So this would be a percentage of the things you got right out of 100. Or out of like a floating point 1, 0 to 1. Anyways. And this actually did succeed. And this is the kind of stuff you'd have to build if you wanted to build a simple test application, a simple quizzing application. But also, whatever app you're going to build for Call for Code probably needs some kind of database. And if you can start with loopback to just be on your way to like writing useful code and not writing database schema or learning a new ORM or something, you're pretty much on your way. You can start with the in-memory database and then quickly move to something like Cloudant on the IBM Cloud, and then you're off to the races. So, go ahead.
That was awesome, Spencer. Yeah, thank you very much. I think the fact that it's very simply API driven is pretty useful to developers, and just a lot of developers might be familiar with Swagger already, and just using even loopback to just generate that stuff in a minute. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So Lysanka, well, I don't know. Has a question in the chat. He says, I expect a few have taken organic chemistry at university with Moodle, but doing a quiz in OChem is not trivial. One has to ask questions about a process or a diagram showing a molecule and then allow the student to manipulate or draw an answer sometimes. Does IBM quiz solution allow for something so complex? So first off, this is not IBM's quiz solution. This is like Spencer's derpy open source solution that's a starter kit for you to build something with. Start there. Then the next thing to say is, if you can define it in this database, if you can define some database and then build a UI, you're off to the races. Specifically, OChem is the kind of thing that's difficult to put online because you end up having to draw arrows and you have to use symbols, you have to use chemical shorthand. But the beauty of JavaScript is that there's lots of libraries for that kind of thing. And that is specifically what I was trying to get at with this starter kit is like, well, sure, 99% of classes can go to Moodle, but you take OChem and you try to put it in Moodle, there's some challenges. So building a little JavaScript thing that let you, a simple JavaScript application like, I don't think I have the index.html open anymore, but a simple JavaScript application like this can bring in a simple JavaScript library like some OChem library for chemical bonds or algorithms, or chemical synthesis, ratio synthesis in the day. You can build a simple app around that JavaScript library, and then boom, you've got yourself an OChem learning platform. Does it replace Moodle? No, it augments it. And that's the kind of thing that would be pretty cool to see from a distance learning perspective in Call for Code. So great question there.
Sorry to interrupt you, Spencer. Yeah, take what Spencer built and build something with that. It'd be really cool to see. Tag us or mention us on Twitter. I'd love to see any solutions that someone built on top of Spencer's thing or extended it. Would be pretty cool.
Okay, Lisanki clarifies the name of his name. And then, so no, this is a multiple choice question, but there's nothing wrong with writing some front end that would let you do whatever, and then store the front end, so the results of that front end in that Explorer.
Oh, Spencer, I gotta ask, are you an OChem nerd? Is this something?
I took OChem back in undergrad, which was many years ago at this point.
They spoke pretty well about it, so I figured you had to have some knowledge.
Yeah, well, I did bust out the ratio synthesis, which probably isn't how they use it anymore.
That's a nice throwdown. Hey, did you write this up as a tutorial that folks can follow?
It's on the developer website somewhere, yeah. It's the same text in the tutorial on our website as it is in the README though. But this is the link. So Tada Labs says, I have a solution that works in Google Speech right now. Is there help to port it? Well, that's a great transition into our next demo, which is going to be talking about natural language processing and automatic captioning. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick fiver, and when we come back, we'll jump into the next half of this, the next quarter or third of this stream, where we'll talk about Pedro and Daniel's solution. Stay with us. We'll be back in 5 minutes, or maybe 3 or 5 minutes less. And then after Pedro, we'll talk to Jody and some of the team about what they've built around crisis communication as well. So stay with us. All right, everyone, welcome back. We're going to continue going with the stream here, and we'll give it to Dan to take it away. Dan, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So my name's Dan Cunnington. I'm based in the UK as a software engineer, and I actually participated in a call for code deployment last year with the 2018 winners. So it's a super exciting competition, and when you see those solutions like come to life in the real world, it's really awesome. So hopefully today we can show you some things that give you some ideas that hopefully will lead to something quite cool. All right, so within the remote education stream that we're working on here in this starter kit, this is an application that allows you to transcribe videos into text. So maybe your students, say if you're an educator, would prefer to have some notes accompanying the video. Instead of having to type that out yourself, you can come and use our starter kit, and hopefully you guys will extend this in so cool and wacky ways that we can't even think of. To generate some notes from that video. So first of all, what we're going to do is just show you a very, very quick demo of what we've done so far. Then I will take you through how to set up the server side. And then Pedro, who I've been working on this with, will take you through the front end and how we've built that. So the video that we're using for testing, this is Lady Gaga. She sent a message to everyone about Call for Code just this week. So I'm sure you guys have seen that if you've been following along. So you can come into the UI here and let's go and upload this video. So just to note, we've trimmed this down slightly from the full length just so that it sort of runs in good time for the demo. And you'll see like a notification sort of screen on the bottom here. So obviously you wouldn't sort of display this JSON to the end users, but it's just to show you guys sort of what's going on. And also you can use these updates from the server to actually customize, a status message for your user. Say if they've uploaded a 20-minute lecture or something, you don't want to just leave the request spinning. So what's just happened here is we've uploaded the video to our server. We've used Watson speech to text to extract the text from that video, and then we've uploaded the transcript, so that comes out of speech to text, into cloud object storage. So that then gives us a URL here that again you wouldn't make the user copy and paste this, but to show you guys how it's working. We can then paste that in, and hopefully we see that our transcript here has been extracted from the video that we just uploaded.
Wow, that was pretty. Can we go back to that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Can
yeah.
you make that bigger? I think it's probably pretty small.
Yeah, make it bigger, magnify it a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow, that's. I mean, I have seen the video. I'm not sure everyone's seen the video, but that is pretty much what she said.
Yeah, it's pretty much bang on, and there's a few things. It's obviously not perfect, but hopefully, you could even extend this by sort of performing even some noise cancellation. I'm sure there's some really cool like processing stuff you could do to the raw video to make sure that you get like a really nice sort of text or audio stream coming out. So maybe that's also a point for extension that you guys might want to consider. But I think the result's not too bad.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So as Spencer mentioned, and Derek and John as well earlier, all of the starter kits are sort of hosted in the Call for Code Github repository. So this is the address for this video transcriber that we've got. And it's also, as Spencer said as well, you might find yourself on this website. The text here for the tutorial is exactly the same as what's in the README here. So the first thing we do, let me just kill that demo version so that we can start afresh. So we need to clone the code. So let me know if this text is okay.
I would just increase it just for fun.
Just for fun, super big.
Also, if I can say, whatever you're doing there with your prompt is pretty cool.
Oh yeah, this is like a ZSH sort of prompt. So it has some nice sort of integrations. You'll see in a minute when I sort of activate certain Python versions, it'll add some stuff on. So, okay, then we just go into this directory. So the first thing that we have to do is create our environment variables. So to do that, we're going to create a file in the root here, .env. So .env is a sort of Python module that basically allows you to easily specify your environment variables and then load them into your code, your server-side application, as opposed to having to get the user to set those manually themselves on the command line. So I'm just going to go ahead and launch my text editor here. So here's the empty .m file that we've just created. So right now we can just copy and paste these placeholders. So you see here we need to now fill these out with our proper keys. So
and these are all cloud resources, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So these are all
big section
created on the IBM Cloud. Yeah.
Dan, you do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Tada Labs asks, do you keep any notion of hints or context? I think they're talking about the speech to text component. They might be talking about the quiz. I think they're talking about speech to text though.
Oh, within the actual service?
Yeah.
So the service will, that's a really good question. The service will try and pick up on sort of meta information. So like when you hesitate or pause,
yeah,
or even like you play music or something like that, it will try and, you often see some outputs from your transcriptions with certain annotations that it's trying and figure out what's going on there at a wider sort of context level.
Yeah,
but again,
it won't put like a literal it'll put brackets hesitation in the text that you can pull out.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But that's a really good question, and I think that could be something that you could look to extend and maybe play with yourself, especially if you're sort of deep into natural language processing as well.
Yeah, I'll just say from my personal experience with it, you can upload a vocabulary file so as to optionally with pronunciation hints, so you can sort of teach it new tricks. Be like, okay, we're reading medical files today, so here's a bunch of virus names, so that it doesn't just get confused when it hears some local words. So you can definitely give it some of that, but it will. How big can the vocab file be? That's in the API docs. It's bigger than you're gonna manually create one. It's the upper limit there, and then if you play with the streaming form of the speech to text API, you'll see that it totally does use context, because the first answer it will give you will be a word that's wrong, and then after it's heard the other words in the sentence, some NLP thing will click in and it'll recorrect the sentence. Be like, oh, this is probably what that sentence was.
Yeah, like the correct form of like your.
Exactly.
You.
Yeah. But being able to specify like different sort of vocabulary is really useful, especially myself from the UK. Like we often have fun trying to work together with people all over the world and different ways of saying things. So I know Derek especially is, we always have sort of back and forth about what is the right way to say things, like sidewalk versus pavement and things like that. So anyway, when you come on to the cloud, so you register, sign up for IBM Cloud. This is my sort of personal account. You can come in quickly, start to create the resources that we're going to need to build, for this starter kit. So the first one is speech to text. So we can just come up and search for speech to text. I'm just going to get this out of the way, and then hit create. So this should work on the free light plan. You can create sort of more paid for plans if those don't suit your needs, but to start with, the free one should be okay. Then we come over to our service credentials, and you see we have some auto-generated service credentials, so we can just view those.
Yep. Well, that's how long it took us to leak an API key.
Yeah, this will be deleted
58 minutes, team.
And it's on my personal account, so full responsibility if anyone tries to spam this. We can paste that in to our .m file, and then the same for the URL down here. So that goes in there.
Daniel, anyone watching, please don't mess with this stuff. Just do it afterward.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, someone wants to to pause the stream and type all that in just to get access to a speech to text service. Yeah, that's fine. We'll be fine.
So we're also going to add in the translator service here. So as part of our implementation of what we've done is actually...
is anyone else kind of upset that it has the 2 pointing to the A? Or what is that logo next to the A?
I can't even see it.
I think that's a character in Mandarin or something. It's a different language.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a 2. I was like, no, 2 is 1.
Okay. My internet's spinning here. I don't know what's
That's okay.
going.
What I'll talk about briefly
mean,
is just that. So we're asking people to make submissions to the call for code. There are some requirements for the call for code. It's not just a free-for-all. You do have to use some amount of IBM Cloud services. In doing that, you're going to discover what is and is not free on the IBM Cloud. And that's one of the things we tried to make the starter kits around is to show some of the cooler parts of what's available for free. If you want to throw a few dollars down for a paid service that's a little bit better, obviously we're down for that. We don't have a ton of credits floating around to help people get comped accounts, but if you have like a really killer idea, you can @Crook in the call for code Slack. I'm sure he'd love to get that ping. And then, like for instance, in previous years when there wasn't a COVID-19, we would go to hackathons at universities and stuff like that and give out what are called feature codes to enable access to some of the non-free stuff in IBM Cloud. But there's a lot of stuff that is free on the IBM Cloud. Everything you're seeing today is free. And if you need a non-free service, just @Crook and @Derek Tay in the call for code Slack, and they'll do what they can to either get you something comped, or maybe we can come up with a creative way to do what you're trying to do without a paid service.
So like we made Daniel here do this on his personal account, so you can see he's not paying for any of this stuff. So this is all you can create this just by creating an IBM Cloud account and doing all of this yourself. But like Spencer said, hit us up if you have a specific use case that you might not be able to do in the free tier.
And Tada Labs has a question in the chat. They say, is there any fees for COVID apps? I think that's kind of what we were just talking about, right? COVID is just part of call for code. I'm surprised you don't have to quote that. Do you not have to quote that, Dan? You're bold. You're more bold than I am, with all those colons in there.
Do I have to quote it? No, it should work okay.
So bold. This man lives on the edge.
Well, we'll see if it works. I mean, that's the big test, right?
Yeah. No, but so like we were saying, COVID-19 response apps are wrapped up in call for code. So we're trying to make it possible to do this on the free tier. As we said, if you find running out of the free tier, if the free tier doesn't going to work for you, you got something else. Just @Crook, and Crook will make the call on whether or not we can comp you something or whatever.
Yeah. So just one point on the object storage. So the free sort of service here creates an object storage in the global region. So what that means is you can specify the actual endpoint that's closest to you to use. So I'm in the UK at the minute, so I'm going to pick the United Kingdom endpoint and paste that in here. Okay, so and one configuration as well that we need to do within object storage is create buckets. So bucket is essentially just literally a bucket of data. You think of it as like almost a table in a database, but for documents. So this is where we're going to store our transcriptions after they've been extracted from the video. So we're going to create this here. And click through. You need to make a note of the bucket name. So that's, we need to copy that into the .m file here. So that's all the credentials we need. This file, yeah. No worries, yeah, no, please shout if it's not clear. Yeah, set of credentials there. Okay, so the last configuration thing we want to do within object storage for the purposes of this starter kit is that we want to actually allow public access to the bucket we just created so that we can go and access the transcripts once they've been translated from the video. So the way
so it's anonymous read, is that what you're setting up?
Yeah, correct. So you can only write to the bucket if you have the API key. That's what we just copied in.
Yeah.
But to be able to like view the transcripts, so you can do this authenticated, where your app can go and retrieve it and perform user authentication yourself. So that's what you would do in the real world. You'd have your own sort of like auth service. You can do that on IBM Cloud, I think, with App ID. Or whatever else you're using. You might have, if you're an educator or a school, you might have your existing LDAP database or something that you want to use. In which case you'd want to lock this down, right? You wouldn't allow this to be public, but for the purposes of this starter kit, that's what we're going to do.
For those of you who don't know, LDAP stands for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, and is it's sort of somewhat of, it's very popular. It's used everywhere. It's also a bit of a meme in how difficult it is to get tuned right and then integrate with. We should definitely have a stream in the future that's just LDAP horror stories and integrations.
Spencer, I'm glad you're able to get the acronym right, because I wouldn't be able to tell you what it stands for.
Well, somebody on Twitter was pretty funny. It's like a bad LDAP joke, and then someone was like, "Is there any good LDAP jokes?" And I said, "Lightweight." So Derek, there's a question for you in the chat. Tada Labs asks, how many IBM services do we need to qualify for call for code?
Sure. So also I see my coworker Daniel Crook answered this in the chat, but for the viewers on the stream, it's only one. So we prefer, you don't have to use 50. The best idea is using them intelligently, I guess we could say. But as long as you're using one IBM cloud service, you're golden for call for code.
Awesome.
Great stuff. So, okay, now we've loaded in all of our credentials and we've configured our services. We now essentially want to install the dependencies and start the application. So as I mentioned at the start, we have sort of two apps here. We have a server-side written in Python as a Flask application and a front end written in Vue.js, which Pedro is going to be telling us about shortly after I've finished. So now, if some of you are Python devs already, you probably already have an environment set up. You might use Anaconda, you might use virtualenv. There's lots of different ways to package and sort of manage a Python application. But we're going to assume for this tutorial that you don't have anything installed, in which case we're using something called pipenv. So this will basically create a sort of mini Python environment within this directory for us to use, and it will store all of our dependencies in there so that we can be confident when we start our application and our dependencies are there and they haven't been sort of messed with by something else that we have running on our system. So the first command we want to run is pipenv -- Python. So here what we're doing is this is specifying the Python version that we want to activate this environment with. If you have installed Python already on your system, which I have, it will be in /user/bin. And you can just sort of specify the numeric version number here. For that, if you've sort of installed Python somewhere else, then you can specify the path to wherever you've installed your Python executable. Okay, so that's now done. So now we need to activate the pipenv shell. So this basically loads in that Python executable into the path so that we can use it. So hopefully we should see as well. Oh, you see, this is where I've made my screen too big. My terminal is showing me the, let's full screen it here. It's showing me now that we're using this Python version within this directory that we're in. So we're not using like a system version or anything like that. Okay, so the next step then is to install our dependencies. So pipenv, there's a pip file that is in the application directory.
We need to stop and talk about this little snake emoji down there.
Yeah.
I think that's an important highlight.
I think that comes with pipenv.
Oh wow, the future really is here.
Yeah. So actually, thanks for stopping me, Spencer, because it's a good point to pause. So these are the dependencies that we're using. It's sort of in the format of this pip file for pipenv. If you are using, say, Anaconda or virtualenv or another sort of Python environment, then in order to get this the application running, you'll need to install these dependencies.
So for those of us, you know, it's old timers on the stream, where's my requirements.txt and why did you change it?
Yeah, so we actually forked the Python Flask starter application for IBM Cloud. And the reason why we did that is because it just set up everything very nicely such that it's ready to be deployed straight away. So we just sort of built on top of that. If you guys want to change and use your own framework, that's absolutely fine.
Well, you used to be able traditionally, if you'd set up a Python application or you cloned someone else's, you'd expect to see requirements.txt and not a pip file.
Sure. So yeah, you may actually be able to install from get pip to install from the pip file. But yeah, that's just the framework that we're using.
Sure.
With pipenv, it requires in this format. Most of the Python projects I've done uses a requirements.txt as well, so this was a little bit new to me. But this is what we have.
We're also going to go over Docker right after Dan's talk. If you use Docker, if you find it easier to develop with, we also have that option. So whether you're a Python developer or you prefer Docker, we have both.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Pedro. It's super portable as well, obviously, so should hopefully avoid having to do this configuration. But anyway, regardless of that, it's hopefully still quite straightforward. And then to start our application, you can run this command. So it's python -py start. And this uses Gunicorn, which is a sort of production-ready Flask server to start our app on our local host. So as a pro tip, if anyone does start developing a Flask application and they want to then deploy that so lots of people can use it in production, the development server that comes with Flask out of the box, I think is single-threaded, so it only sort of supports one request at a time. So it's very advisable to try and move towards something like Gunicorn when you go to deploy your app to production. And actually, this was the nice thing about forking the IBM Cloud starter app on Python, is that this is all set up for us within running that command. We're already at the point where we can start to run a production-ready server to handle multiple requests a second. Okay, yes. So
that's what we build as developer advocates. We build planet scale hello world applications.
Yeah. So yeah, here you can see if you were to specify run, then that will just start the Flask development server, whereas actually using starts the Gunicorn production server. And there's a few other options here as well. So does anyone have any questions, or would you like me to sort of go through the code? It's not a huge amount of code actually. So maybe
sorry, did you open the web page? Does it work?
Sorry, yeah, we'll show you it works. So I'm going to refresh this. So there you can see that's working. And hopefully, if we do this, yeah, we should start to see it working. So
that's tight. Do you want to look at the? I do want to let you get to the code, but can we go through the architecture diagram one more time since?
Yeah, sure. So
now people have sort of seen the pieces.
Yeah. So we have what we've just seen is basically how to set up the services on the right-hand side here. So the speech-to-text, the translation, and the cloud object storage.
Dan, can you make that a little bit bigger?
Yeah. Sorry, this is going to be a repeating thing.
There you go.
Excuse me. So is that better? Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. So we have this the Flask web app that we're just going to go through in a second. And as Pedro was saying, we have a Dockerfile, so we can actually sort of package that and deploy it in whatever runtime you're dealing with as a Docker container. And on the user side, we have a Vue.js component that Pedro will talk through very shortly.
Awesome.
Okay. So the main directory, excuse me, is split into two. So we have, well, my throat's going now.
It's all right.
Need some water. You've been chatting for a while.
Well, maybe Pedro wants to talk about Docker right now for a minute.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's fine.
Okay.
I don't have the virus, by the way, if anyone's worried, so we're good.
Well, it's 14 days. How would you know?
Yeah. So the main two folders is the server folder and the front end. So we're going to just look in the server side for the minute. And then the sort of first entry point that the front end will use to connect to the back end, the server side, is in the index.py file within the roots. So is that code big enough for you guys to see?
Yeah.
Great. So the index, so that's localhost 3000 with just with nothing at the end of it, so just a plain slash. That's actually serving up the front end. So you can see that's sending the index.html file. Then we have a couple of routes that you can use to sort of extend and build out your own front end, or even change these as well. So we have a language models a GET request. So that will return all of the supported language models for the translation service. So that should go off and pull down all of the different language models that the Watson translation service supports. So you can use that to then decide, like different combinations here, for example, of what you can translate to and from. So then the upload video route is where basically the main sort of processing is happening in terms of the demo that we've just shown. So this is a post request, and we're using what's called multi-part form data. So I'm just going to load up Postman. Actually, I think I already have it open. So for those of you that are familiar with Postman, then you go into form data here and actually specify a file upload. And then the source and target is for translation as well into your different languages. If you're not familiar with Postman, go and check it out. It's really awesome, and allows you to like very quickly sort of test out APIs as you're building them. I find it a really useful tool. So basically we come in here. We need to check if we have specified a file name, and then we go and start a thread to process our video. So if you guys are, say, more familiar with Node.js, that is asynchronous, which means that we could actually have that, the code that processes each video could happen here within the request body, and Node.js would automatically sort of kickstart an asynchronous process that would go and deal with that video, whereas Python is synchronous. So we can't directly process the video within this sort of request block here, so within this entire request, because we don't want the user or the front end to have to wait for the entire video to finish processing before we send the HTTP response back. So basically, there's often a timeout with HTTP requests, and if we're allowing users to upload, potentially videos that are 5-10 minutes long, we don't want to sort of kill the request whilst the video is still processing. So the way we've implemented that and dealt with that for our starter kit is by starting or spawning off a new thread within Python that can go and process the video. And then we just send back to the user straight away, say, okay, great, your file's been uploaded and we're now handling it. So for those of you that were paying close attention, you would have noticed that we had some status updates as the video is processing. So the way we've implemented that is using something called Mqtt. So that is a publish, subscribe messaging sort of protocol that allows you to send the server to publish messages down to the front end to let the UI know sort of what's happening at various stages within the conversion and the processing. So we'll go into the thread code here, and you'll see how that's done. But I hope that's clear that you basically at the request level, the user makes the request. We then hand that off to our thread to process it, and then we return a message back to the front end to say that that's been started successfully. So are there any questions on that?
That was a great explanation, Dan. Thanks for going through that.
No worries. So what have we done? Yeah, we've imported the tasks. So I have a file called tasks here. So, and this is basically a method that will handle each video. So actually, before we go into that, I'll show you where the services are configured here. So you'll start to notice this is where our credentials are being loaded into the application and actually instantiating the Watson services. So if you want to sort of extend this and add more services and sort of change it up, you can come in here. It's within the init file in the services folder. And we also here set up our what's called Mqtt Broker. So in order to publish and subscribe to messages, you have to have something in the middle that will listen for the messages being published by the server. And then the client also needs to subscribe to something that can then retrieve those messages. So in the sort of production real world, when you're deploying this application, you probably want to deploy your own Mqtt Broker. Now, it sounds complicated, but there is a really nice Docker image that uses something called Mosquito that makes that super easy to do. But even easier than that, which is what we've done here, is use a public broker. So test.mosquito.org, for example, is a community-driven open source public broker that anyone can use. Yeah.
So the logs on that site must be just bananas.
Yeah, so you have to be careful what you send over there because it's public and anyone can subscribe to what we call a topic. You can, you don't want to be sending confidential data, shall we say, over the public broker.
Something like API keys that we wouldn't want to show on our stream.
Yeah.
No.
I just want to set up a bunch of like scanners that watch all topics for dank memes and personal. Maybe not PII because that's kind of mean, but I feel like there's some fun stuff to have.
Yeah, well, you better have some good sort of computational resources to do that, because when you subscribe to, so actually this is sort of going off track now, but Mqtt is really awesome because you can have something called wildcards, where you can say like, I want to subscribe to everything on like /call for code, for example, and you go call for code /star. Whereas if you just subscribe to /star, that will literally give you every single message that's coming over the broker. So you want to be careful not to do that.
No, yeah, we have to be.
So unless you have like a high performance computer that can handle the amount of messages. So also worth mentioning as well, like you can add authentication to that Mqtt client. So obviously like having everyone being able to subscribe to any topic is not necessarily desirable in the real world. So we haven't done that here, but again, that's something that you might want to at least think about for the type of applications that you want to build. So this just sets up our sort of Mqtt things here. So in our task file, we notice that we're starting to see these publish messages. So this is what's actually sending those statuses back down to the front end of what's going on. So we're extracting the audio, we're saving the audio file, we're performing the speech to text, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and if you follow this through, you can see exactly what's going on. So yeah, and the actual code, right? This is one method that basically does the whole thing from extracting the audio from the video. So that's using a library called MoviePy to do that.
Cool.
We save that locally in a folder called audio extractions. Then
Keep that text.
Yeah, so that's so Git doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't have to like create the folder. There's probably a better way to do that, to be
No,
honest.
yeah, for sure.
Um, so then once we've saved that audio file, we then can load it back in and send it to speech to text to recognize and get the text back from that. So then we here pull out the transcript from that response from speech to text. And then if you've specified that you want to translate the transcript, and we do that by checking if you've asked for a source and a target in the form data. So that's these sort of fields here in the form that you send. We then send that transcript to the Watson translation service, and again get back the translation. And finally, we then save those results to the cloud object storage and generate the URL so that the front end can display display the resulting transcript.
That's quite dope.
Yeah. So, are there any questions, or anyone want to ask anything, or?
Well, I thought we might return to the movie pie section, which I assume is just an FFmpeg wrapper, because probably is.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's kind of the funny thing about writing real applications, right? I mean, not that this is super real, but it's real enough that it's like, well, yeah, the API only does so much, right? You could imagine that the API might have been written to do that for you. But it isn't. So you end up having to do some of this competition. What I see with my like cloud architect hat on is Python has the GIL, Gunicorn notwithstanding. There you might actually block on this transcoding. Like if you upload a significantly large file, Python has to transcode the whole thing. Oh, it's not really transcoding. It's actually just, oh, thanks Nemozon for the follow. You might block is what I'm long-winded way of saying. The other thing is that you have such a nice application here that's entirely about just pushing and pulling and popping and stuff, and not trying to do any work itself, but just sort of director model. Yeah. And Cloud Architect hat on, I almost want to take this MoviePy code and throw it in a serverless function, in a serverless action, right? Which yeah. I'm not trying to give you work, Dan. I'm just saying almost to the chat, like, hey, chat, so if anyone wants to make a pull request, make a little OpenWhisk action out of line 20 through 31.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, the whole thing in this, even this whole method could actually be a serverless function, and by sort of spawning a thread, that is essentially what we're doing, right? Mm-hmm. We're sort of handing this off to some sort of processing that can just deal with it. And yeah, like you say, Spencer, you could even sort of break that down into smaller serverless functions. One to do the extraction, one to do speech to text, one to translate.
Yeah.
So, wow.
It's still early for you over there, Dan. I think it's 6:30. You could probably get that done, by.
Well, so what I'd also recommend actually is so when I've built Python apps in the past, I've instead of sort of starting threads, you can use like a task queue. So a popular one in Python is something called Celery. Mm-hmm. Weird names, but that sort of is a much more scalable sort of asynchronous task queue, because if you run this application now on my local host, basically and loads of people, like thousands of people start using it, we'd be spawning thousands of threads, and my machine can only handle so much. So it would be quite difficult to scale this app as it is currently. Whereas if you use something like Celery, you can have what's called Celery workers, and ideally you deploy this in something like Kubernetes or OpenShift, and you can then sort of radically scale up the amount of Celery workers that you have to service these tasks as you need. So that's probably what I would do, as well as looking at the serverless route, to sort of handle this type of asynchronous processing in production.
Yeah, well, by putting it in Kubernetes, we solve our scaling issues. #confirmed.
There we go.
Well, do we want to pop over to Pedro, and Pedro
can
take us through this
time now
app?
Yeah, absolutely. So Pedro's going to show you how to make it look pretty and really wow your users, and also tell you about Docker as well, which is super cool.
Yes, let's do it.
So I think if you just start sharing, Pedro, we're good to go.
Okay.
I'm also going to quickly go and delete my services so no one can
All right, how's that?
start racking up a big bill for me on my my cloud. My cloud
All right,
account.
Dan, we got a question for you. So Todd All Labs asks, how do you subscribe? Are you talking about Mqtt subscriptions? If you're talking about Twitch subscriptions, we don't have subscriptions.
So for Mqtt, Pedro will show that in the code for the front end. But it's a really good question. And Mqtt has client libraries in whatever language you want. So say if you go out and build an iOS app in Swift, or if you build an Android app or whatever, there's client libraries.
Mqtt is from like the 90s. It's an old protocol from a more elegant.
It is, but it actually is what so I think at least a flavor of this is used within like Facebook Messenger. So it actually powers a lot of industrial IoT applications.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even know about. So it is from the 90s, but it's still being developed. There's people in the UK that develop it, and it's actually really cool.
Yeah. And then Nemo Zahn, who just followed the channel, thank you by the way, says, "I'm sorry to interrupt. Never apologize to us. But can you suggest to me what to learn in Python if I want to become a general software engineer? I've already learned basic and some advanced topics of Python, such as class and Flask, web scraping, etc. Smiley face." Do you have anything on that, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that's a really good start. So once you know sort of generic like scripting in Python, like your building blocks, like your if statements, your for loops, you've started to learn Flask for creating APIs. You're pretty well on your way to being able to build like a suite of cool Python apps. If you really want to push yourself, the reason why I love Python is because it's really suitable and easily integrated to the machine learning libraries. So things like PyTorch, TensorFlow, it's really nice to integrate with that and sort of train machine learning models in Python, which, by the way, you can also do on the IBM Cloud within Watson Studio. So I'd mention
just
that.
By the by, just random thought.
Just casual.
Yeah, what I would add to that, Nemo, is if you haven't learned the database layer, that's gonna hold you back if you don't learn it yet. So something like SQL Alchemy or a different ORM which stands for Object Relational Mapper, anything that lets you make sure your apps are solid. And then, Pedro's gonna take us through Vue right now, which is front end stuff, right? And there's something really important about having just enough front end skills. That's like, if you can't make a cute website out of it, it's more difficult to show people what you've built. And in terms of just getting some of that early Hacker News credit, show off at hackathons, show off at work, this app is really cool, and Dan put a lot of work into it, but it really pops because Pedro wrote a slick UI. So
without Pedro, no one would care.
Hey, but without you, Dan, this would not work. It would just be a pretty UI. So I really believe that, it's 50-50 here.
And then I want to say thanks to Here to Thrive and CM Griffing for following the channel. All right, Pedro, take us away.
All right, awesome. So hey, everyone. So I'm going to take you over how to set up the front end as well as the Docker instructions. So let's just, first of all, take 1 minute to explain how I structured the application, the UI. So right now I'm currently using Adobe Xd. It's a free software, but you can use Sketch, you can use Figma. There's a lot of other services you can do, but I always start here with my UI. So first of all, the whole goal of this application was to help teachers transcribe their videos into notes for their students. But this has a lot of other different applications that you do not have to really have this user interface. The good thing about the API that Dan made is that you can use that as a foundation for other type of services. Imagine like a real-time translation with augmented reality. There's so many ideas that you can do. So let's just focus here on the Vue application. So first of all, for those who are not familiar with Vue, Vue is a framework for JavaScript similar to React. It was originally started by a former Google developer called Evan Yu, and it's used all around the world. So I personally liked it because I came from the Angular 1 community. I don't really like React, although I can write a little bit. I just fell in love with Vue. But this can work. This concept can work with whatever framework you want, even vanilla JS. So first of all, we have to structure the whole application, right? So we have our home that's going to have different components. So first, remember that when you're designing an application, whether it's for React, whether it's for Vue, Angular, you want to create simple components for your user interface. So I split it up into the following. We first have home, and inside of home, we're going to have two components, upload and transcript. So the upload component is what's going to be connected to all the APIs for the Watson services. Well, not all of them. In this case, we are only using for the speech to text, but we already have the translations built in. So this will allow people to upload the video by drag and dropping. We have a nice drop zone plugin that's open source that we used. And then afterwards, here in the transcription part, this component is going to be in charge of the Mqtt data. So the stream that Dan mentioned of all that data is going to appear here. So now let's go back just so then we recap, let's test it out. Let's go here, upload the 10-second video, Lady Gaga. And you see here live performing speech to text. Now it's going to take a little bit sometimes, and depending on the length of your video, your quality of internet, it will take a few minutes. But as you can see, it's went all the way to message 8 pretty quickly. We can copy this, open our browser.
Yeah, I'll definitely say it's like super snappy, and that's nice.
And we get the same one. So like Dan mentioned before, don't really worry about the errors here. There's so many things that you can do to improve, whether it's the voice of the person who's talking, whether it's chunking it up. So, but imagine if you have to transcribe thousands of videos, this is definitely a tool that could help, or at least the base of that. So let's go back over here. So we already seen our front end. Let's go over here. So recapping, we have 3 components, really one layout, and then 2 main components that do all the logic. Let's go see the code. So if you go to the GitHub, actually before I go over there, all of this code that you can see is in GitHub. So here, if you go to the video transcriber GitHub, you'll see that we have a nice structure here. We have the server side and we have the front end. So let's go in here into the front end so we can see what we have. And this is basically the instruction. So first of all, you need to make sure that you have your link. Then you have to go inside of that and then do yarn install. If you want to actively develop it, you would use yarn serve, and then your build once you want to minify it into one index HTML file and serve it for production. So let's walk through the code.
Do you want to tell people 30 seconds on the difference between Yarn and NPM?
Oh, sure. So I'm not an expert. Basically, Yarn is faster.
And let's thanks Linux94 for the follow, and thanks Agardi for the follow.
Also, hey Pedro, I know it'll be a question probably that comes up. What program were you using?
Sorry?
Which program were you using to the previous program you were just showing on your screen?
You're saying this one.
Yeah.
It's Adobe Xd. So it's a free design tool for UI UX front end. They have plugins. It's great. But like I mentioned before, you can use Photoshop, Sketch, even diagramming platforms to make UIs. This is what I just use.
Awesome.
Nice. So, yep, no problem. All right, so back to the app. So like I mentioned, we have here our components. So for those who are not familiar with Vue, you basically have all of your working files in the source directory. So here, if we go to the package.json, you can see the scripts to start the server. In this case, we're using Yarn. Here's the main script. We're using a Bootstrap plugin from Vue. And then this is what actually activates it. So one of the concepts of Vue is to have, let me see if I can find the index HTML file, app.vue. Okay, here. So this is the main container of the application, right? Then we have our home page, which actually has all the text. So we have video transcriber. let's just say you wanted to change this text right here, video transcriber, you would go to here to the home component. So apart from that, we have the upload component where you can see, let me just minimize this right here, where you actually see the logic for the uploading. So like I mentioned, we're using a great open source framework called Vue Dropzone for that component. Then we establish the Dropzone parameters. We hook it up to the API, upload video. We set up the thumbnail width. So this thumbnail is the thumbnail that's going to appear right here. So there's so many things that you could do with this. You could convert this actually the playback to actually play the video here. We just kept it simple for you. So we put a max file size of 50. Dan, do you know if there's any max file size for the API? I think it was 50, just to make sure.
Yeah, I know off the top of my head. I think you can probably configure that on the server side if you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once you get to bigger, the speech to text API.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you get bigger, the more mature applications are going to use a streaming model, anyways.
True.
Yeah, and also what I would say there is a really good point is we'd probably use cloud object storage to initially store the video if it was huge. So what we're currently doing is just storing that within the file system on the server. But if you've got like a huge video that you want to transcribe, as Spencer says, you'd stream that directly to cloud object storage.
Yeah.
Precisely. Exactly.
It'd be cool. There's also like a whole architectural hack where your app creates either an HMAC or something that is a temporary authentication token, and then the client does the uploading and your server never scratches it to disk.
Nice.
I'm not sure that's super reasonable to do to the this app doesn't need that.
Yeah, this is basically take this app for those who are watching and play around with it. Think of other applications other than video transcription. Maybe use the translation API that's also included. So moving back to the application, this is probably the most important method for receiving the data here. Okay, this is the file. We do the subscribe to the topic right here to the response, and then in the transcript we display it here. So very, very simple. You can also, if you see here, this is actually the raw JSON. So you can see what the object looks like, but you can also extract this text and just show that. You could also show this text file within there. Like I said, play around with it to see what you can do with it. So now let's take a little break for questions and then move on to Docker.
I want to definitely say thanks to Paul Poulen for the follow. Really appreciate that. And then I don't see any specific questions about the Vue.js there. Just for me, is that JSX or is that a different dialect?
No, it's just Vue. So right now it's displaying HTML. We have a JavaScript here. That's really the beauty of Vue. It's just I personally never liked JSX.
No, JSX gives me
Yeah,
PHP
yeah,
flashbacks, man.
I really, really love the Angular 1 days. The way that it involved the data transfer and connecting the components together really resonated with me. And Evan, the developer of Vue, he used to work in Google and they were working on Angular. So I think this is really like part of the essence of Angular, but also modernized with new components and taking philosophies from other libraries like React.
Pedro, just before you move on to Docker, whilst you're here, I realize there's something I forgot to explain with the MQTT stuff. So when a new request comes in on the server side, we generate what's called an MQTT topic. So, and then we pass that directly to the client when they upload the video. So then this function here allows you to then subscribe to that topic, which basically means that you get the updates about the video you've just uploaded and no one else's updates. Because if you have, your server side and then like 1,000 users connected on the front end with different clients, you want to make sure that you have a way of allowing each user to subscribe to the notifications from their own video processing rather than somebody else's. And there's a callback function there the onMessage function that basically gets run every time a new message is received for that particular topic, so for your particular video.
Precisely. Yes, Dan, exactly. Thanks for pointing that out. So right now, if you look at the home component, you can see I have some comment console logs. Feel free to activate those to see the data streaming. But yeah, this is where you would subscribe to the client. This is where the data part. So we're storing the stream of data right here, as well as the transcript response. So take a look at that. I think that's pretty much it on the front end. Now I'm going to move on to Docker. So
we got so Pedro. So Perry Rivera is asking any resource or recommendations for getting started with Vue. What's your?
Yeah, definitely their website, Vue.js. If you're looking for in Google, very great documentation. You can get started with Vue with a few lines of code. I would also encourage you to look for here the ecosystem and the guides. So very great documentation. I don't think it won't be that difficult to learn. But if you're looking for more, there's tons of resources on YouTube as well. That's where I learned.
Awesome. Okay, so we can go to Docker. We do have Jody and friends from the cooperation starter kit standing by, so we should probably chop. But
yes.
We can get through Docker real fast, that's for sure.
All right, so very quickly, I'm going to post these Docker commands in the GitHub so that we can make sure we're on time here. So one last thing to remember, and very important for the GitHub.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more question.
Oh, no problem.
Dupier, please let me know if I said that wrong. Dupier says, how difficult do you think it would be to take your starter project and convert the front end to React?
Not that difficult. I'm not sure. I'm not a React developer, but the Mqtt plugin, and maybe there's one for React. I'm pretty sure there is. I would just have to check you have to check the documentation. So you could migrate all that code. You could take the front end here, the style CSS, even I'm not sure what other components you have here for drop zone, but there's an equivalent in React. And you're probably even going to find more documentation. So
there's a ton of everyone and their sister is writing React components for whatever you can possibly think of. And thanks to Da Labs for the follow. Glad we got that figured out. Sorry, last interruption.
No worries. All right, so one very important thing: if you are going to use Vue in this project, remember that you have to build. Okay, once you're done developing it, right? You develop with the yarn serve command. You have to run that yarn build command, and then it's gonna produce a dist directory. So this dist directory right here is the actual application. So if you notice here, it's already built, minified, built for production. That's basically what you have to do. And then after that, you're going to go to the public and then replace those files there. So very simple to get started. Let's now talk about Docker. So with Docker, I personally have trouble with my Python environments. For me, it was a mess trying to deal with Anaconda, virtual environment, pip. So one of the things that's in the repository is a Dockerfile, right? So let's look here in the Dockerfile, what it exists. So Dan, I'm actually not a good expert in Docker. I'm going to let Dan explain this in detail.
Great. So so Docker is really nice. It's super extensible. So that first line there basically allows you to take an existing image and start sort of building on top of that. So that is a sort of I think is an Ubuntu a Red Hat image, sorry, that basically sets up like a Linux operating system with like things that we need, and then we can go in and start to install Python and pip, and also we're then making the directories there for the server side where it needs to store things and making sure that the permissions are set correctly. And then line 24 is basically what copies all of your code that you've written into the app folder, and then starts the command there to start the application up.
Exactly. Thank you, Dan. So remember, if you are going to customize the front end, you have to first build it and then put it like from here, the distribution, and then paste it into this public folder, and you're done. So now let's quickly review the commands. I will publish this on GitHub right after the stream. But basically, we have a Docker container running. We have our video transcriber. Let's just say we want to build a new container. We made a new update, and we want to rebuild it. So we just have to do Docker stop. We take the first 3. And I realized this is for people who are a little bit more experienced and know about Docker. If you don't, you can go to the website, as well as visit our code patterns and our resources. There's a lot of good stuff there. So what I'm doing here is that I'm stopping the Docker container just to confirm. Now we don't have any running. Now let's actually build the app. So Dan already showed how you can, what consists the application and that Docker file. Let's take this command, build it, and we're done. So after that, all we have to do is take this Docker run command, run that, and we're solid. So now if we refresh this, hopefully the demo gods are on my side today.
Light the candles.
Trust. It's all about the trust.
There you go. So like I said, Docker is probably the best way to get started with this. That's my personal opinion. But if you don't know Docker and you have like a simple Python environment, you can definitely follow those pip instructions. But moving forward, there's tons of things that you can do to this application. Like I mentioned, you could take this text file, put the full transcript on the screen. You could add a translation button right here. So the good thing is that this is completely open source for you. All you have to do is go to GitHub, open up an issue. You can even contribute to the repository if you would like to. And then we can make this better for everyone in the world. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Awesome. And I'll shout out that, this channel, this Twitch channel has a lot of different people streaming on it. I stream on it. JJ streams on it. The Java folks stream on it. We talk about Docker and Kubernetes a lot on the stream, more so than we do languages, more so than we do call for code. So if you want to get into that DevOps space or whatever, let us know. We're deep in it. Thanks, Pooja. Cool. All right. So is that everything you wanted to show, Pedro?
Yep, that's pretty much it. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out on the
Do you want to show the GitHub one more time for your app?
Yeah. One more time.
I'll just, or someone can throw that link in chat for anybody who wants to get it going. Lee Song K has one question. He says, Docker's great until it doesn't build in your install, especially composed Docker. Any advice on debugging into Docker when it just doesn't build or run?
On my side, I think one of the challenges I have is I have a lot of Docker images. Sometimes things conflict. Make sure you don't have nothing conflicting. The other aspect that one of the challenges that I have as well is like the ports, making sure you have the correct port, as well as when you're testing your application, make sure you don't have like multiple apps. Like if you're going to do that, if you know what you're doing, definitely use different ports. But for building it, I'm not sure if Dan, if you have any suggestions.
Yeah. So so first thing to say is Docker has this really nice thing where it will cache the build file. So if you've changed, say if you have not changed the first like 10 lines of the build file, the Docker file, when you then run the command again to build, if you've changed the 11th line, then it will only start running the commands from the 11th line. So it makes it super quick if you need to change one thing. So I guess one tip there is try not to change things around in the Docker file. Obviously, if you need to, you can't help it. But if you know about the cache, so here you can see it said using cache. That's because Pedro's actually ran this build before, and the steps are exactly the same. So it can just use what's in the cache. The big thing, especially when working with like apps that process video, is if you're copying files. So I think in the Dockerfile, there was a copy statement. Obviously, if you have like a lot of large files, that copy operation is going to take a long time. So yeah, there it is. So only copy into the container the files that you actually need. Docker has a Docker ignore file,
Yeah.
so you can see it there on the left-hand side. So I just make sure that any sort of things you need. So for example, we don't want to copy in the node modules, right? So I added that
or
there.
any secrets or the .m file or
Exactly. So
notes.
yeah, so you need, so yeah, that's sort of what I would say to that.
Yeah, and what I would say is that if you're getting a big stack trace in your Docker build, it's not something probably you wouldn't get live anyways. It's not like building it locally would change that. So you can always just move the command and the env. You can comment files out of the Docker image and then build the Docker image as like a little base and then cd into it, exec it, and then run the command interactively in the Docker. And then once you're execed into the environment, so for instance, like right here, what I might do is I might, let's say, most likely the place that this is going to break is on line 12. So I might comment everything under line 12 and then exec into the Docker image and then run line 12. And I'd find, unable to install pip because we don't have Python-H. It's a dependency issue, right? And that tells me I need to install more things on lines 10 and 9 because that's where I get the dependencies that are used in later steps, which is most of what the errors you're going to get if you have the expectation that the app is going to build. If you have the app and like the long, the Dockerfile is the place where all errors just propagate to, that's a software delivery problem and not actually a Docker problem. And in that case, you just got to try to get those errors earlier rather than at runtime or at build time. I hope that helped. We do a ton of Docker stuff on the stream. Otherwise, I'm happy to take you through it on like Monday or Wednesday or something. Okay, so should we cut over to Mr. Tay?
Yeah, no, I'm here. Great job, Dan and Pedro. I want to shout you guys out again because this was something that we had to put together in less than a week, have it from idea to completion in less than a week. And the amount of stuff that you guys did in that amount of time, the Mqtt stuff, how you got this set up, really great job. So thanks to you guys again for being part of this and creating some really good content for developers and other people to use. So great job.
No worries, Gary. Thanks. Just to say on that is that because of that time frame, there might be things that you find that don't work. So feel free to just raise an issue and we'll have a look at it.
Yeah. And there's the beauty of open source. Anything you find that doesn't work, or if you want to improve on it, send it, create an issue or send in a pull request on it, and I'll make sure Pedro and Dan accommodate everyone's pull request and everyone's issue all the time. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Let me share here. I'm going to be brief. I know we're a little bit over time here, but the last component to the Education Starter Kit is the Skills Network platform. And so just to talk briefly about that here, if you click, see the tutorial.
Do you want to make it a little bigger there, Derek?
Yeah, sure. This page is done. But, yeah, so you can hit see the tutorial for Skills Network platform, and then it'll take you over to this page for creating a virtual classroom environment. It's pretty interesting. If you want to play around with it, you can fire up the interactive demo, which will take you to our skills network that we have built for Call for Code. And basically what this is it's a portal where, depending on your use case, whether you're representing a school, like a K-12 school, or you want to set something up locally for some other purpose where you want to have courses and learning paths and things like that, you can do that within this platform. And it's pretty cool because we're offering this through November of 2022 for people to use for free. So this is something that you can get your own learning portal, integrate your own classes, engage people, whatever you want to do. It's built on top of Open edX, if you're familiar with Open edX. It has the ability to integrate a chatbot right into the learning platform here, which is from Watson Assistant. So you can create your own chatbot to help people come onto the platform and learn about whatever the courses are that you're teaching. It has the ability to have a live video conference, like a virtual classroom as well, which is pretty cool. You can use Jupyter Labs for data science. There's the ability to run like competitions within this platform as well. So it's a really, really cool thing that you can get set up. I'd encourage you to go to callforcode.skillsnetwork.site if you want to check this out, or again, you can get to this from the link here. And you can see that, there's a whole admin backend where you can create these classes, create your own classes, and be able to integrate them into here so that people can enroll for these or take these classes. So you can see it's pretty professionally set up. It's really simple. All you have to do is you're going to complete a request form here. And then this will take you to a site where you can request an online portal for creation. So just answer this as detailed as you can. Try to provide as much information as you can about it. And on Tuesday, I believe at 11 a.m. Eastern, everyone that has requested this, you'll get an invite for a call that will be recorded if you can't make it. But we're going to go over exactly what it is that you can do with this. We're going to get you some tools on getting started and help you with getting started with adding good content into this for whatever your use case is. And just to show something that kind of came up here, this is pretty cool. Let me increase this here. This was a Skills Network platform that was created for an art school. And this was done, set up, and with all the courses and things integrated into here within a week. So they took their content and added all of this stuff into the Skills Network platform that we provisioned for them. So, this was an art school that didn't have a lot of online content to begin with, but with everything going on with COVID-19, it was something that they thought would be a great way to reach out to their students. So this kind of explains everything. And this was from start to finish in a week with all of these courses added here. So you could do something like this with your platform, whatever your idea is for it. We want to be able to support you guys in helping with the remote education aspect of things and kind of make sure that you guys are successful if you want a portal of your own to whoever you're reaching out to be able to do this.
And definitely part of that give back, because not everyone has the money to buy whatever.
Exactly. And that's kind of what the team that works on this wanted to do was create a great thing. And not only, there's a couple other LMSs out there. I mean, there's a lot of them. And I'm sure we're familiar. We talked about Moodle as well. But, the different one of the
there's a difference between open source software and a platform that's run by somebody else.
Exactly. And one of the big differentiators is, this isn't just like, submit assignments, have them graded, things like that. The ability to further integrate with chatbots, for example, or with the Jupyter Labs for anything data science related. It also, works on IKS as well. So it's a really, really good solution and a platform for people. And, you have an opportunity to use it free for 2.5 years. So we thought that was a really good thing to add into this, even though it's not as technical as the stuff that Pedro and Dan and Spencer worked on with created extensible tools for developers. This is just still, I believe, a great path for people to be able to get something else out of it, even if you're not a developer, and you're still looking for some resources to help with remote education.
Yeah. So Here to Thrive says, as an interesting comment in the chat, he says, "My friend and I are actually working on a crowdfunding app for local businesses and hospitals. We're going to use data.gov's API to pull information about local businesses so that we can contact them and find out what they need. The question we are tackling is how can we process the surveys that we send to the hundreds of thousands of businesses with ease? Can you suggest how Watson might be able to help? So far, I've only heard you guys talk about the video transcriber."
Someone want to field that one? I don't know. Dan, you might have a thought on that.
Yeah, I have to say, Dan, you're an expert in natural.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Pedro.
I heard Pedro.
I heard Pedro.
Oh, sorry. Keep going, Pedro.
No, I was about to say that Dan's an expert in natural language processing, right?
Well, not really, but right. I would have a look at, especially for like documents, look at the discovery service as well. So for sort of storing and extracting insights from documents, certainly look at that. And then also the Watson, Watson Data Studio, where you can basically go in and sort of start to write your own neural networks. So that's probably where I would start.
Absolutely. the discovery service is designed to take unstructured text, free response, and pull out clusters of it. Like there might be a cluster of like, we need more personal protective equipment, and stuff like that. Definitely something to check out. I want to thank Chad Queen, Alan67, and Kambiasama22 for the follows. Really appreciate it. And unless there's anything else, Derek, I think we're going to take a quick break.
Yeah, no, I think it was it. I want to thank everyone for helping with this on the IBM side, and everyone for watching. We appreciate it. If you're interested in anything else or anything that IBM offers for cloud services, cloud.ibm.com/catalog, and what we were just talking about here with the discovery service, you can pop open any of these things. You can take a look through the docs, which are all pretty updated and pretty helpful, as well as any of these services also do have API docs as well. So if you're wondering how to get started with these services, and you want to know, the best way to do that, of course, this is going a little slow here for me, but you can open up the API docs here, and if you have a preference in a particular language or whatever have you, this will kind of walk you through step by step how to do these in the languages that you're comfortable with. So I would encourage you guys to check this out, and feel free to tweet any of us if you have any questions, concerns, want some help. We're here to help.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 5 minutes or less with Jody and Henry and Va. And they've built an application, a back end and a mobile app front end that enables people who have stuff to work with people who need stuff and try to move all that back and forth. So stay with us. We'll be right back. And thanks for stopping by.
Welcome. We are back for our final episode of the 2020 Call for Code Global Challenge Starter Kit reviews. And what we're going to do before we jump into our last topic, which is community cooperation, I thought I would set up for everyone on the streams and here in the conference, what is a starter kit and why would you use a starter kit? So often you might want to come and join the fight with us, but you don't have yet an idea. And so what we've done, the IBM teams with a set of experts, we've built a starter kit. And a starter kit is a problem statement, it's a use case, it's interviews with some experts. And we talked to them, developed a solution, and then we started to think about how would we share that with you through a set of architecture diagrams, some open source code. We wrote down a tutorial with all of the instructions that you can take, fork, pull into your project, build upon, build around, add to it, spin it for your story around call for code. And then so our starter kits are a great way to start running really quickly, because we want to bring the solutions, or especially around COVID-19, as quickly to those that are in need. So let's just take a look at some of the starter kits. This year, 2020, there are 2 different challenges. So we've got a we've got a climate change challenge, and we've got a COVID-19 challenge. So we're going to spend our day today talking about COVID-19 starter kits. And we've already covered crisis communication, remote education, and now we're with the team to talk about community cooperation. So community cooperation, think about what's happening in your neighborhood here in Ridgewood, New Jersey, very close to New York. There are people infected, and there are people in need. There are people that need supplies, that need food, that maybe want to connect with the local hospital and donate food or what they have. And often your desire to contribute, you want to make sure the goods get to the right people that really require them. And so the team together created a starter kit that, one, takes advantage of location data, builds out a supply chain app using IBM cloud technologies, really clever, a mobile app, chat bot. I think you're going to see a whole bunch of technologies here, a backend cloud database, a node application running in IBM Cloud, really well constructed starter kit for you. And I'm just encouraging everyone to join the fight. Jump up to first get our code. So we share it in GitHub. So github.com/call-for-code. You can jump over to our starter kit and drill down into the communication cooperation one. All of the examples here are available for you to build up around. Join us at developer.ibm.com/call-for-code. You'll see a whole set of technical resources and data sets, and of course, a link to the COVID-19 Grand Challenge, and particularly drive down to the starter kits. We're going to spend some time today with the team. So Jody and her team are going to take us through the community cooperation. So Jody, tell us about your team. Tell us about the project. This is killer. Let's do it together.
Okay, am I on yet on the
Yep.
video, or?
There you go.
Okay, you have to tell me if you can see me or not. Okay, I see Spencer. Do you see me now? Or can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Okay,
Thanks,
cool.
Jody.
So, hi, I'm Jody Burks, and like everyone on this call, I'm a developer advocate with IBM, and what we do is we help developers achieve success with new technologies or technologies that they're newly learning. And I do a lot of different things at IBM. My background is actually not just with development and data science, but I have a PhD in biochemistry, and my doctoral work actually involved studying viruses using computational biology methods or bioinformatics. Now, why is that important? Well, everyone has skills that they may not use on their day-to-day job that can be helpful during this pandemic. And it may be a hobby, it may be something you studied a long time ago that you're pulling out of, I guess, retirement, if you want to call it that way. But what we've seen is the coronavirus pandemic is really an all hands on deck time. And so one of the things that we're seeing is like open source PPE production. You'll see maker labs. You'll see people just volunteering their 3D printer in their spare time to make PPE for local hospitals and medical professionals. You'll see people trying to figure out how to donate food for local food banks. You'll see people with supplies that have found out about maker labs, and they want to connect with the maker labs to get all this stuff facilitated. You also have volunteers in the community that they may have a musical ability, or they may be an artist. They may be able to perform outside someone's home that is quarantined right now, or in isolation, or even grocery delivery. And a lot of people have questions about, how do I connect with people that need my service, or people on the reverse, people that say, hey, I need help getting my groceries, or I'm in need of such and such material, or I want to organize a sewing party to put together all these different pieces for different masks. How do we put everybody together? So this app is for, and here, these are the links for our starter kit and for the GitHub repository, and these should be in the chat by now. And so now I'm going to change screens. This is our starter kit. This is what you'll see here is on this page. You'll have a link to the tutorial. You'll have a description about the problem and the idea. You'll also have an architectural diagram and some of the steps. You'll also see links to technologies that might be useful and other documents and starter kit, not starter kits, but other ideas to help you kind of build on this. So the other page is our GitHub repository. And this is where you're actually going to see the steps and find out, you'll have, again, the architecture diagram, and then all sorts of different services that you can incorporate into your application that you're building. Now, this is meant to jumpstart development of whatever kind of application you're putting together for your community to connect people. Our goal here is to facilitate those connections such that your community's needs are able to be met. So this is going to be a mobile application. There's server-side components, and there are two different types of users. So you'll have the people that have things or have services. Those are going to be your supplier users, and then the recipients. And this mobile application allows the connection between the two and has a database. So this we use location services from here. It's a React Native mobile app. It is a chat bot using Watson Assistant that actually connects to a database. And Henry is going to talk a little bit more about how all of that pieces together and why we use those different components to connect people, and then how are the users going to enter their particular information, get connected in the first place. Henry, and then I'm also joined by Henry Nash and Bob Barbosa. They're both developer advocates, and they have done just a tremendous job of putting things together. We've had a huge team that have all contributed to this project. We've got it done in about a week. So just like the other starter kits, IBM has really put out a lot of different efforts and opportunities for collaborating to really move this forward as far as getting a solution for COVID or helping communities make their own solutions for COVID as well. So Henry, do you want to go over the architecture?
Sure.
And introduce yourself as well.
Yep. Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Henry Nash, and yeah, like Jody said, we're all developer advocates here. My background is I'm an entrepreneur startup guy, really. So great. This sort of challenge is perfect for myself and entrepreneurs out there to just quickly grab some of this technology and go and build stuff that can actually make an impact on our communities right now. And you know, the reason why people talked about doing this quickly is there's no point. I don't think any point in taking 2 months to get ready to release something for COVID-19. We need the solutions now, you know, to connect within the community. So what I'm going to do is, as you said, I'm going to talk through that architecture, and then we're going to dive into the actual server-side components, and then I'll pass off to my colleague Var, who will do the client side. You know, so client-side React mobile application. Var's going to talk about that. It's this service piece that I'm going to talk about first. And you know, what we wanted for this application was the ability to, you know, store stuff that either you're going to donate or that you want to find within the community. So we need some kind of database, and we chose Cloudant. There's a free tier Cloudant, so anyone can use it for free with IBM Cloud. So you're developing an app here, it doesn't cost you any money. And you know, it's a NoSQL database, very easy to develop with, because you haven't got to worry about schemas, getting set up ahead of time, and all that kind of rubbish. Sorry, EB2 guys. But it's really easy to set up. And then what's an assistant? What we really wanted to do is build an app that would combine storing stuff, and if you want to use a form to find out about it, that's great. If you want to use a chat interface to find out what's available, you can use that. And that's actually quite an interesting common pattern, we think, for lots of community applications, whether they are exactly this one or one you have in mind that might be similar, which is how do you combine the storage of things and a chat interface to access that stuff. So in the GitHub repo, which I'm looking at here, this is the thing that Jody showed you. So if you follow the link in the tutorial, you'll find this GitHub repo, and you can clone it obviously onto your machine. Then this tells you how to go about installing all the components, and basically create a Watson Assistant session. So Watson Assistant is IBM's chat engine, if you like, so that you can create a Watson capability to say, given this is the sort of inputs I want, then you can build and train it to give you outputs, having analyzed that information. And I'll look at that briefly. We're not going to go into an in-depth session of creating those dialogues in this session. We have done other ones on that, and if people do want that, we can arrange another one on this Twitch stream. But I'll introduce it and then show you how we use the output of that in the server side. Just as I said, storage, a cloud and database on IBM Cloud, and then 3, 4, and 5. 3 and 5 are the mobile stuff in terms of getting an API, getting the here application, and we're on the server. So I'm not going to walk through every step of install. What I really want to do is jump into the server architecture and talk about why we did some certain things, how you could take that, modify that, adapt to your own purposes. So what I'll do is for that picture, I will start by showing you where the Cloud and the Watson Assistant are, and then we'll go look at the node code that kind of ties that together. So on the IBM Cloud, I have deployed a couple of services, and there's some extra ones, but I've created a Cloud and database. Just a few clicks, you can get yourself a Cloud and database. I called it Community DB. The other ones are test ones I did while development. And then we also have a Watson Assistant service deployed. The instructions are in the README of the GitHub repo to exactly how to go and create those things. I'm sure you can follow that. If anyone does have problems, then obviously ping any of us and we can help you with that. What's interesting is how we tie. I think that how we tie those bits together. What the going to now look at is the actual node code itself. This is the code that if you do a clone, you'll get this. If I just show you where so basically I've set this up to access the call for code stuff.
Okay.
This particular GitHub repo. We welcome pushes to this, by the way. Please do. We'll review them and integrate them. I got a few tips as we go through this about stuff that we'd love you to attack if you have the motivation, or if you want to just take it, clone it, modify it. Please go right ahead. So, the assistant, this is the kind of skills, a dialogue skills file that you get when you create a Watson Assistant service, which really is, you input a bunch of the typical questions, and then you train it and with the answers and so forth, and so it can then create that kind of interface. So I'm not going to go into depth in that in this talk. We can do another one if you want. But then then we'll go into the server side. So this is the server app, this Node.js app that you saw in the architectural diagram. And the first thing you have to do,
just real fast, how long is this skill file?
So about 1,000, was it 1,500 lines or something? 1,300 lines.
So it's a significant amount of work for people to bang this out.
It is,
okay.
Yeah. And so we probably need a whole session on creating skill files if people were interested in doing that. I'm sure we've done other ones. We can do we can do a specific one on that. The interesting thing about this one, which is you'll see in a minute, is one of what we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to integrate output of a Watson skills file with live data. And so, as Jody mentioned, and you'll see Var demonstrate later, and I'll do some curl examples of it in a second. We want people to say, where can I find milk, for instance? But Watson doesn't know how much milk there is. It can work out, it can understand that the question is, oh, you're looking for milk. And so we want to pass that back in the server side. We want to then go look in the Cloud database and say, well, is there any milk? And if so, how much have we got and where is it? And then combine that and then return that to the client. That's one of the interesting things about this particular application, which I think is quite valuable for other examples. And so that's the bit we're going to concentrate on, showing how that works.
Okay, and then Tada Labs has a question. He says, I took a bio break and may have missed it, but is this an Alexa skill?
It's not an Alexa skill, no. This is built for Watson Assistant. There are ways of getting it into your various homes, and sound like a great idea. And one of the reasons why we did do this kind of combine, obviously we could let a client talk to Watson Assistant, get the answers, then call Cloudant, get some answers, then do some munging. But that requires a lot of intelligence in the client. We wanted to build something where if you wanted to just put an SMS interface on this, or you wanted to do some other, say Alexa or Siri or whatever, then you don't have to, we're not going to make, we're not going to put requirements on the processing and capabilities that you need to run to post-process the output. That's one of the reasons to do it in the server side. The server code we have, so server.js, this is the main server code for our Node application. And just before we dive into that, the instructions talk about how to, once you've defined those services, Watson and Cloudant, then just like in the previous talk, actually, there's a .env file where you put the credentials in so the server knows how to authenticate with them. Again, that's described in the README notes, but here's my .env file that contains links to and keys, which, yes, you can go, if you use those, you'll get into my cloud database, but then I'll kill it after this anyway. So
yet again, we leaked the keys on the Twitch.
Exactly.
Come to the Twitch channel, get all the unrestricted access.
Exactly. We like to share that way. And the instructions tell you how to do that, so that's how the server can authenticate to both Cloudant and Watson Assistant separately. So in the server code, going back to that, there it is. Basically, two sets of APIs in here. I'll start with the traditional ones at the bottom, which are, you know, API resources. So looking for resources, you know, I want to find milk or whatever it happens to be. One of the things we didn't have time to do here, and I'd love someone just to push something here. We didn't get time to take a Swagger file for this. I really, you know, apologize for that. Someone would like to do that, or put a PR in with, you know, the nodes, you know, Swagger UI module, you know, and put in it's an Express node file, so you can add the, you know, the doc commands to actually auto document the APIs. That'd be fantastic PR if someone could do that. But we basically have an API resourced set of things, you know, get, put, delete,
Sure.
standard stuff.
All the CRUD operations, yeah.
All the CRUD operations. And then we have an API message one, which is the one that talks to Watson. Mm-hmm. And rather than embed all the detailed talking to Watson, talking to Cloud, and in this file, we created two basically like data access objects, basically pseudo objects here. One for Cloudant, where all the Cloudant stuff is embedded, you know, where you have an, you know, where you have an object we can say find, and it knows how to talk to Cloudant. Feel free to steal any of that if you're building an interface to Cloudant. And similarly, one for Watson. You know, if you've got a message, how do you actually go call the actual detailed Watson command APIs? Which means your server code then stays nice and high level. So, you know, server code, and then those two kind of effectively data access objects, which talk to Cloudant and Watson Assistant. What we can probably do, we're actually going to run this and just you know, throw a few commands at it just so you can see what's going on. Let's go back to that one we were looking at. This one here. This is that's the post one. Let's go find the get one. Here one, which is, you know, I get resources. Resources is the term we use for something you want to share with the community. You know, milk, bread, N95 masks, or whatever. So down here in my terminal, we'll go into the server app, and I can just run this here. I'm just going to run it here locally. And so this is running the server code locally, and tells me I've got a connection to Cloudant, et cetera.
Is that Cloudant running locally, or is that in the cloud?
Cloudant is running in IBM Cloud.
Sure.
Because we put these keys in here. It can go authenticate to the IBM and to the Watson Assistant. So we've got Assistant and Cloudant running on IBM Cloud. I'm running and debugging my Node module, Node.js server locally, which is kind of a nice way of doing it to start with. There's instructions as well to deploy this itself, obviously the Node app, to the IBM Cloud as well, which you can do, of course. So now, I mean, you know, so we've got this API here, which I can fairly simply just, I think I have one. Let's see. So, for instance, here we can do just a curl command. You know, I'm a nuts and bolts guy. Love curl, curl, printfs. Great way of debugging, in my opinion. And one of the nice things about architecting any solution in microservices, individual components, is each has an API. You can test it with simple primitive commands without having to kind of treat the whole huge architecture as one big black box. So I'm just going to call that API command. Here we did, and basically we got back a bunch of objects, which are in fact the things we store in Cloudant.
Oh, sure, food,
milk, and that sort of stuff. And so this is stuff that's already live in that particular Cloudant database.
Wow, if you have 5 N95 masks, I think you're a multi-billionaire.
I'm surprised there's any left. I'm surprised that no one's got those yet. So, you know, and so real simple way of just getting your server up and running and trying, and you can get a bit more clever. You know, this, for instance, this, you know, the API, it takes you know, you can add query parameters on there. I said just milk, so I only got the milk one there. We actually did the name to be, you know, pattern matching. So as long if the name you put in there is anywhere in the in the item, you'll get them back. So, you know, very simple, but, you know, easy Cloudant database, all the CRUD primitives are there, and you'll see this hook to a nice mobile interface in the second part of this talk with var. But just running it here, we can get an idea of, we've got our Node app here running, and it's talking to our cloud and database. Now let's go look at the Watson side of things.
Sure.
That's where it gets kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah, because some of our viewers probably have written an Alexa skill, but probably have not written a Watson skill, or whatever we call them.
So what we want to do for that, and so when you talk to Watson, you first thing you need is a session. I happen to know. Let's do that. So if we look in here, I put the AP message. This is the thing you're going to pass it a text string basically to Watson Assistant, and it's going to then process that and give you an answer back. And you have to pass it a session, and then the text you want. Simple as that, actually. And so there's also an API in here somewhere, up here probably, to get yourself a session ID, and then you pass it into that. So let's play with that and see what happens. Whoops, I had it written. So get me a session. And so I need to get a quick session. Little tip, by the way. One thing that used to really annoy me when you use curl is that we never put a new line into the after any text you got back. It's quite a nice little trick you can do, which is if you put like, normally if you do curl, you can type -w and new line. You put that in your curl RC, and it automatically puts a new line at the end of the response. Things like that, please.
That's what? It's been that easy this whole time? Oh my god.
I know. So anyway, that's tip of the day. So we got our session number now. So now what we want to do is we want to actually send it a message. So let's go back. So this time we're going to send a message to but we need a bit more information in here. So we're going to send it a message, but we need quite a lot more. So we're going to have to put it's a post, isn't it? Let's go and have a look at that.
Yeah.
Have a look at the code here. Post a message. It's a post command when you write to things. So write to Watson. So we're going to do we're going to post, and then let's do in here. We'll do we'll do -d session ID. Oops, get this right, Henry. Make sure we get our things in the right place.
This is bold, Henry. Writing JSON live.
I just think it's important to be able to do that.
Yeah. Do you need 2 S's in session?
Yeah, you have to check the spelling there.
As a team, we will be able to do it.
Oh, that's right. So I've got a session there. I've got my session in there. Now I'm going to put the text in. And let's just try something like hello, because it's a chat interface. I should be able to say anything I want the chat interface. And then I need.
Tada, I don't exactly understand your question there. Can you ask it a different way?
So let's see if this works. We're going to post a session ID and a text, say hello to the message interface.
Hey.
And it's come back with a bunch of things. Let's pipe it into JQ, which is what I like to do to pretty out the output of curl. Hey, and it's got a response. So this is actually the output of what you get back from Watson Assistant when you send it something.
Mm-hmm.
You get an intents, which is said, basically it's like, so which of the types of thing intents is like the type of question, if you like, simplistically. Right. So it thought, it's a general greeting. It recognizes hello, and if you say, hi, good morning, it recognized all this kind of stuff, and its response was hi when I said hello. So very simple, normal thing. The interesting thing for us is we want to actually do something where we actually ask for, like, where is the milk? How much? Is there any milk? that was the thing we had in our database. We had milk. So instead of saying hello, I'm going to ask it, where can I find milk?
Whoa.
And it is, and what it does is, and this is what I get back to the client. So it's intense. It's recognized that someone's looking for supplies, somehow as a client, not only have I got there is milk available, but I've seen, look, it's filled in the places where all the milk is.
That's awesome. And it
now
you have the whole object.
Interestingly, Watson didn't know that. So how did that happen? So let's go back and look at the code and see what's going on. So in API message, what happens is, and if you like, notice I logged the request body in there, so that we saw that down there. Mm-hmm. That was the question, I sent it. We call Watson, and then we post-process the output, which is up here. So this is basically what we're doing. We're actually going to post-process that, see if the response was something to do with supplies, which is the Watson terminology of these things. And if it is, then we're going to try and look up in Cloudant to see what we have. So actually what happens here is we look at the intent. Were there any intents? Did it understand anything? Yeah. And if it did, it was an intent. Was it something to do with supplies? And if it was, and the confidence was reasonable high, Watson it can never give you rare to give you 100% accuracy. It'll give you a confidence level about whether it thinks it understood the question or not. If the confidence is greater than I put 0.3, in a production environment, you probably want to experiment with that. With a bigger Watson skills file, you can get that confidence level up. Of course, it's a matter of how much training you've done and how much data you've put in there, how many examples you can run against it. And if it will have a confidence level, it pulls the item out and then goes look up in Cloudant. And actually, let's actually have a look a bit closer to that. Let's actually log what comes back with. Whoops. Oops, what happened there? Let's go back in here and let's actually log what Watson has come back with. So we pass in a result here. So let's take that and we'll just log. Come on, is that right? What's going on here? Just the result, please. There. So I'm going to save that, kill my server, start it again. I'm going to re-execute that command now. I may have to try get another session. We'll see. Let's see if the old session is still valid. It is. And now let's just look. So what happened there? So we can see really what's going on. So this is before we post-processed it. So this is what Watson came back with. This is actually what Watson told us. The supplies you need are milk. So it doesn't know how much there is, but it knew you were looking for milk. If I put wear masks, it would have masks in there. Yeah. Here's the intent we're looking at, and it was pretty high confidence. And that's it, because it doesn't know anything about it. So that's where we come in this code, which is we then find that, look up in Cloudant for that value there, the value that it returned, find out how much there is, and then modify the response to say there is or there isn't some, and then put in the equivalent of a get on that for that item into the response, which is why in the actual thing back to the client, as well as this stuff, we get the actual kind of resources equivalent of doing a get on that item. So that's a kind of really, I think quite interesting way of integrating Watson understanding of questions with data that you have
connected to a real database. Yeah,
it's a real database.
So go ahead. We have a question. So Kambiasama 22 says, shouldn't the confidence number be as close to 1 as possible? 0.3 confidence would return a great deal of false positives? ?
Yes, and as I said, I mean that's something where you can improve that by increasing the amount of data you push into the Watson training, so that you can improve the confidence level that it's milk you're really first of all making sure, does it understand that you're asking a question about a thing that you want, as opposed to, is it going to be sunny today or something like that?
Yeah.
And then, it depends how accurate you want to be, because, as you'll see, the output of this is used in a mobile app, and it will display what it finds. If it did get something back that was wrong, okay, didn't work, I'll try asking a different question or asking it differently. But I agree. I mean, it's quite low, but we experimented a bit and found that, and this is true for any kind of training, whether you're doing visual training or model training or speech to text training, whatever it happens to be, is, the amount of data of training data you can provide, influences significantly the confidence level, the accuracy you can get. And so
it's also not, not a very scientific answer, but having used these a lot, every Watson API that's machine learning powered returns a confidence level. And it is not really super linear. It's sort of like 0.3 shows up, 0.4 shows up in all the examples, because below 0.3, 0.4 is just a long tail of garbage. Yeah. And really, there's not a ton of difference between like the 0.5 and the 1 in terms of how correct it is. It's not super...
If you notice this one, I think it was 0.9 or something. It was returning.
Do you want to try to trick it? Do you want to ask it such a bad question that it thinks
something?
It's...
We could let's see.
Just ask it like, where's McDonald's or something.
Yeah, where is Santa Claus?
Yeah, see. So that was below.
Yeah, you see.
Far enough below, and you can actually see the confidence.
It dropped, and
we bailed on intense right there.
Yeah, you see it, and so there's that. You see, it realized that it didn't understand that at all. So no intent. So that's why the code looks. Did you get the right intent of the supplies? And so you if you like, you're already kind of halfway in, because it did recognize the supply. Therefore, you can probably lower the confidence level a bit, because you've already kind of if you like, compared with just doing on confidence, then you'd have to be careful, because this would match is above 0.3. But I also checked to make sure you got the intent on the supply intent, so that it did recognize that you were looking for a thing, as opposed to where was Santa Claus.
Yeah, really cool stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's about all I was going to show now. So what VAR's going to do is take these exact APIs, and you're going to see them plugged into a mobile application, which processes exactly these questions and then looks about how to displaying them. So I would encourage you, take this server-side code, adapt it to make it your own. If you've got questions, feel free to push PRs if you can improve what we have here. Love that. Things that would be interesting, for instance, we don't do any kind of user registration. We thought that, what we do is we store within each item a unique user ID, which is actually the ID of the mobile device, so that you have a pseudo equivalent of what's yours.
You can at least do sticky sessions, yeah.
Sticky stuff, but you can do that kind of stuff. So we don't do any of that, for instance, which someone could do. I mentioned the fact that we don't do the open API spec yet. Someone could do that. And there are many different ways you could improve and adapt this to community sharing in general when you want to have a chat interface as well.
Yeah. So as we transition, I'll thank a couple followers. Thanks for R33, and thanks Behuba for following. Really appreciate it. Let us know what you want to see on the channel. We're happy to make it happen. And I guess with that, we'll transition over to Va.
Yeah.
Yep, grabbing the screen right now. Just give me 1 second. All right, just let me know when you...
Yeah, go for it.
Yep.
I think...
Yeah, it's going.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
So you see it?
Yes.
All right. So hello, everyone. Thanks for that, Henry. My name is Var Barbosa. I'm a developer advocate in IBM's Center for Open Source Data and AI Technology. And what that just basically means is I get to play around with open source AI and tools and resources. And currently I've been primarily playing around with TensorFlow.js. And more recently, I started getting into Elira, which is an AI extension toolkit for Jupyter Notebooks. But today, what I'm going to be covering is the mobile application for the community corporation. So that we saw before earlier. So this is the same architecture diagram. And I'm going to be primarily focusing on the React Native side of things. And for those not familiar, React Native is just a framework for developing cross-platform applications. So you would basically write it once, and the idea is it would work on iOS, Android, or on the web. And it's primarily written in JavaScript. And I'm going to take that React mobile application and connect it to the server that Henry just showed us, and basically make those API calls that you saw him do. And then I'm also going to take that and connect to the here location services, where we'll be able to plot some of that information and do some routing and some mapping with that information. So if we look at React Native real quick, the first thing we want to do is in your environment, you're going to have to go through and actually, let me get back over here, is go through and set up the prerequisites that you're going to need for the React Native. So there's the prerequisites are Xcode, because I'm going to be running this on iOS, on Apple Mac. But if you wanted to do Android, you'd basically use the Android Studio. And then you would need CocoaPods, which is the dependency manager for Xcode projects. So it's similar to like an NPM or PyPy. And then from that, we have the other repository, the other dependencies, which is Watchman, which allows you to go ahead and monitors your code. So as you're making changes, it'll rebuild, so you don't need to restart the application all the time when you're building. Sure. And then Node.js, of course, for the dependencies. So the first thing you'd want to do is clone the repo, which I've gone ahead and I have it cloned here. And once you clone the repo, you would go into the environment file. So I won't show mine like Henry showed his, because I don't want to delete my stuff right now. But actually, I can show mine because I'm on the mobile.
Oh, Val, you might be the first person to not leak an API key so far. That's because I was following Henry. But basically in the environment variables, we're going to have the server URL, and the server I'm just running locally like Henry did. And then there's the here API key, which basically is the API key that you get from the here technology services. And I can show that real quick. So when you go into here, they just have the APIs, JavaScript, REST APIs to allow it to do mapping, routing, tiles, weather, traffic. They also can allow you to find parking lots and create custom routes and other information, gas stations and all that. But what we're going to be using the API for is basically for routing information, so we can get the directions to where the supply is, and also for geocoding and search. So if somebody types in an address, we can take that and turn it into Latin long information, so we can do the routing. And once you have your here account, and they also provide a free account, which is what I'm using, and you would go into login, and once you're in there, you can go ahead and sign up for an API key. You create your key, and then this is the key that you would go ahead and put in your environment variable. And that's the key I would go ahead and put there. And once we have the key in place, and you can just go ahead and npm install. So I already done it. I'll do it again, but it should be quickly. There shouldn't be anything you needed to install. Do we actually, I noticed on the previous page there was like an API, like an app ID. Do we really need that, or is it just one of those that?
Oh, no.
Yeah, you don't really need
you don't need that app. Yeah, just, yeah. And then once we have all the node dependencies installed, we can go ahead and we'd have to install the dependencies for iOS. So you just simply cd into the iOS folder and then run pod install, and that's going to use CocoaPod to install the dependencies. And that should be pretty quick as well, since all this was done beforehand.
And oh man, this uses Ruby?
Is that pod? Yeah, CocoaPod.
How much technology can we stack in one?
Yeah, exactly. So then we have that all set. So now I can go ahead and actually run the run iOS. And what it's going to do, it's going to launch the Xcode iOS simulator, and we'll go ahead and see the app in there. It's going to take a minute.
That feeling when the simulated phone is better than my phone.
Yeah, all right. So we have a few, and there's the app, and it's going to launch it once it's all set to go. And it may take a minute because I rebuilt everything. So, and actually, while that's doing, so what we have here is in the starter kit, we have the mobile app, and that's where everything is. And actually, when you with React Native, if you go to the, let me get to the CLI real quick. I'll wait for that. Oh, it's over here. So in here, if you go to the documentation, so if you wanted to create your own React application, you go into the documentation and environment setup, set up the environment, and then you would, I was just doing the React Native CLI quick start, and you would select your OS and your target environment. In my case, I'm Mac and I'm doing iOS. And then we already talked about the prerequisites that you have to have installed, Cocoa, Pod, and Xcode. But then what you would do, once that's installed, is just basically run npm React Native init, and that's going to go ahead and create a sample React application for you. And what that does is it basically throws all this into here. The only new thing that I added here was this source folder where I put all our screens. But all this other stuff is in here, and it'd be ready to get running, and you can launch it, and you'd have a sample React Native app with just one page that has some React Native text and links to the documentation. But my app should be up right now. All right, so the app is up, and what we have here is we have the home screen, which just has some information about the call for code and the starter kit. And then we have the donate page. And in the donate page, and so when you first go to this donate page, it's going to go ahead and list, it's going to make that API call to get all the resources that you particularly have added. So if I didn't have any, it would show none, but since I've added 2 of them, it'd be here, and I can go ahead and click and add another one, or I can go ahead and edit one of these. Nice. And one of the things it does, is actually goes ahead and pulls in your location information from the device. And one thing I should mention about that is when you're running in the simulator, the location information is not readily available unless you go into the features, location, and then you set it to one of these. I just set it to Apple's headquarters, where you can set it to a custom location.
Oh, so that way, if you select freeway drive, it'll just make up a freeway drive?
I'm assuming so. I didn't try that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yep. So this way you can test your application against different locations. And so when the application makes a request for a location, it's going to return to whatever you have it set in here. And by default, it's none. So if you run it and you're getting into issues, you might.
Yeah, the null data can really confuse things.
Yeah. Yep. And the other thing you want to click while we're on location, let me show. The other thing you'd want to make sure to do is that I'll actually prompt you, but it didn't prompt me because I already accepted it. But in the privacy, you go to location services, your app, and make sure you have it to allow to use location services. So those are a few things to check when you first get the app going. So I'll get back into it. All right, so that's the donate screen. And now we have the search screen, and this is going to be searching for all other devices that are. So I can search, for example, milk. And this is just making that same API resource call in, and this time providing a parameter of milk. So it comes back with milk, and I can see these locations. And I can go ahead and click on one of them. And what this does is going to take you to a map to show you where that milk is located.
Gotcha.
Yep. And so we have that. We can click on it, get some information about the milk. So the location, I guess that person who entered that didn't put no location, so it just takes the Latin long.
Is that just
also?
Is that Apple's headquarters? Is that the default? Is that what I'm getting from this?
Yes, yeah. But I believe I think one of these I have is not the default. But let's see. Yeah, but that was the default Apple location. Yep, so this one's when I entered. And when I click on it, it's going to show me the milk in the description. And what it also does is when you click on it, it's going to go ahead and compute the routing from where you are to here. So since I have my default location set to the Apple headquarters, it's going to take me about 40 hours to get that milk. So I'll have to find someplace a little closer. So, and that's another enhancement. When Henry was talking about enhancements, that's another enhancement that you could probably add, or someone could put in a pull request. It's to search it within a specific radius. So it's not bringing stuff from across the country to you. But you can go ahead and get the routing information there.
It also seems like from a AAA perspective, IBM App ID would be a pretty good thing
Yes.
to add to this, just as a simple auth layer, make people do a sign on, that kind of stuff?
Yep, exactly. Yep, that'd be another enhancement or update people can add.
This looks really slick.
Yep. So that's basically what the app looks like. And what I can do now is actually go through some of the code for it.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing, like I mentioned, when you run that npx React Native init, it's going to add.
Interface bar. Do you want to quickly show the chat? Or?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
I
would
think
have gone to that one.
output of what we saw on the server side.
Yes. Yep. So.
So after I swipe right on the milk, I can chat with someone.
Well, actually, whenever you get the search page, you can go into the chat, and what I can do I can say, where can I find milk? And this is going to trigger that API call. Did I have my server myself? Let's see. Yeah. All right, hold on. I messed up my server.
Yeah, it sounds like there's
yep.
some folding into text versus object expansion issues. I'm sure it's
restart my server and come back here.
Doesn't need a question mark. Doesn't need a question mark either. So.
Yep. And what I can go ahead is just make sure I restart the app as well. So there you go. Go to the chat. Oh, well, I'll have to look at that, what I did, because I was playing around with it earlier.
We saw it work earlier.
Yep.
We believe that you can decompose a JavaScript object into things you can click in this.
Now, actually, I can just point it to Henry's server instead of mine, but yeah, because this is just the response that we're getting from the server.
Sure.
So something's up with my Node.js server.
Do you want to do one thing for me?
Yes.
Will you cancel your server and then show me what the app does when you press chat? Like, does it just 404 or?
It just gives you an error and says, please try again later.
Please try again later, yeah.
Yeah. So we can definitely add error handling into
well, and just how things behave when they're offline, right? I think it matters a little bit, especially when we're, it's already mad. Probably failed on getting a session.
Yep. Yeah. So just return an error. But yeah, so that's another point of upgrading. It's to go ahead and turn this into more of a progressive web app, or where it can function offline or without connectivity. Since we are connecting to CloudInt in the backend, you can actually set up PouchDB on the client side, and that allows synchronization between CloudInt and the front end client.
Yeah.
And then that way you can do the offline and still have access to to all the supplies.
Totally.
So when you go ahead and you run the npx React init, it's going to, like I mentioned, add all the stuff for you. It's going to have a default application. The only thing I added was stuff from the source folder, which I'm going to add. And I added a couple extra dependencies here, which is the geolocation, so I can get the information and some of the navigation information. So the way we have the app set up is that's just the fonts. We're using the Mqtt fonts. Those are some of the images we're using for the logo. And then the lib, we have this utility function, and this is the file that's making all the actual API calls to the server. So it's going to make the search call, the adding and updating a resource, and getting your session and message. So that's basically, and all these are just using the JavaScript fetch API. So nothing special about this page here, just making a bunch of API calls. But then what we have here, the screens, and each one of these files makes up the screen that you're actually seeing. So first we can look at the app.js, which is the actual application. And what this does is it lays out all the screen. So we have a navigation container, which is part of the React navigation. And then in there, I go ahead and insert a tab layout. And in my tab layout, I basically define the 3 tabs: my home tab, my donate tab, and my search tab. So I define those 3 tabs. And within the donate tab and then the screen tab, I actually define another layout because there's multiple pages on those. So for example, if we look at
so Va, do you want to scroll back up and just for the viewers, I think that tab layout is a great example. Do you want to really talk through, it's React Native, JSX? Because I don't think the viewers know that.
Okay, yeah. So basically, like you mentioned, it's JSX. So you're mixing JavaScript and HTML. And within you define the tab navigator, which is a component from the navigation, the React navigation component. And within there, you would define the style. And what you would need to do is anything that's not a string, you basically need to put it in quote in the curly braces, and within the curly braces, you can go ahead and put in a component. But if you want to put in, you can also put in JavaScript. So I had some, I'll look at it, but I have some of them that I have JavaScript inside the curly braces. So you're allowed to put in components or JavaScript. And within each of these tab navigators, in this case, I define the initial route, which is the first screen it's going to go to when it opens up, and some tab options that we have. So in the tab options, it's basically just the CSS for the tab. So I have the active color when the tab is active, the inactive color when it's not on, the tab is not in focus, and then the background style for the tab, where you can include the padding and the background color. And then within the tab navigator there, I go ahead and identify each of the screens for that tab. So in this case, I have 3 screens. I give them a name, give them the component, and we'll look at these components in a minute. But this is the home page component. So that's what's going to fill up in this screen. And then I give it the icon that I wanted to use, which is a home icon, which we can look at that, which is just a CSV icon turned into a React component. So we can show that in a little bit here as well. And then the other screen is the donate screen, and that's made up of another layout component. And then we have the tab screen, which is made out of another layout component. So this donate layout component, as you can see here, it's a stack navigator, which, so you have multiple navigators, and most of the people are familiar with this. You have the tabs, which you can usually see in the bottom or the top, depending on your device. And you have the stack. So actually I can show. The stack is what you see here, where I'm on this screen, I'll click on a button, it just slides over to another screen. And then you have the tabs over here. So this one, because my server's down right now. So this one, I can click on it and it'll stack to another screen. So the stack is just stacking screens one on top of the other, and you just slide back and forth between them, as opposed to a tab where you can see all of the screens and you can change between them.
Sure.
So, yep. So for the stack, I give it the name, I give it the component, which is the screen, what the screen looks like, and then any options. And for the donation stack options, here, it's just basically a button that once you click on it, and it's in the header, and once you click on it, it's going to take you to the add donation screen. And then we have the search stack, which is very similar, except it's going to take you to the chat screen or the map screen. Now, each of these components, they're just individual screens. So if we go ahead and look at them, so for example, the chat screen. So this is how you would basically define a page using the React Native. You'd have the styles that you're using. And basically, this is the CSS styles, except you can't have no dashes. So then you just write them in camel case. So background color, width, height. And this is just the CSS for the screen. And then within here, actually, let's start at the bottom and work my way up. It's a little easier. All right, so this, when you return from one of these components, you basically have to return the React Native component, which is basically made up of these components. So I have a view with this particular style. And inside that view, I'm using a keyboard avoiding view. And what the keyboard avoiding view does is when you're on a device and you go into a text field, it moves the screen up so the text, so the keyboard, when it pops up, doesn't go ahead and cover what you're trying to type in. And then we have the style for it, the behavior, it's adjusting the height. And then these are just some offsets to align it the way you want it, just exactly right. And then we have a scroll view, and this is just a view that has a scroll bar, so if the information gets too long. And within here, I'm taking the messages, and we'll see that in a minute. These are the messages that we get back from the server, and I'm gonna just cycle through them. And as I cycle through each one of them, I'm just gonna give them a key, so they each have a unique key, and just using the date time in this case. And then create a message object with all that message information.
So that's like your inbox, is that what that is?
Yeah. Yes. No, this is the chat when you're talking with Watson. Yep. When you're talking with the Watson assistant, it's just going to populate all the chat information. Let me turn my server back on so that way we can see it afterwards. So it'll just pop all the message from you or the message from the server. And then we have this other view right here, which is the bottom where basically this view is just made up of the text input where you can go ahead and type in your information, and then the send button. So when you click on it, it sends the information. And on submitting, we're actually going to call the send message. So we can take a look at that right here. So what happens is when you type a message and you hit send, we're going to create the payload. Actually, let's go. Before that, we have the session ID. So when you first load onto the screen, it's going to go ahead and get the session ID by calling the server API and get the session ID and set that as a state. And where do I have my states? It's a little further down. Actually, just find it easier. Yep. All right, so where did it go? Okay, yep. Nope, that's not it either. Sorry, 1 second.
Classic.
Okay, here we go. So when I initiate the chat, I'm going to basically initiate it with some state parameters. So I have the input, and within those parameters, you basically have the function to go ahead and set it. So I have my input variable, and I have a set function to set it. And so also with my session and my messages. And then we do the React use state. So it knows, it recognizes this as a state, and it's going to initialize it with, in this case, it's going to be the empty string, and this one's going to be an empty array. So when we first initialize it, everything is empty. And the basically React, once you use this React, it keeps track of all the states, so you basically don't have to do that, and it'll update the UI accordingly as the state changes. So when we first log in, like I mentioned, it's going to make the API call to get the session, and then it's going to call set session ID with a session ID that gets returned from the server, and that's going to automatically update the UI. So when you write some text and you go ahead and send the message, it's going to take the input that you wrote. It's going to take that session ID, and then it's going to call add messages, which basically add messages is adding it to your list of messages that you already have. And then it's going to reset the input field, and then it's going to call the API with the message payload. And then when the response comes back, we're going to take the text response with the session. Actually, the one thing to mention about the session ID that I don't believe Henry covered is with the free plan, I believe the session ID only lasts about 5 or 10 minutes. So if you lose the session ID, you have to go ahead and make the call again. With some of the other plans, it lasts a little bit longer. And the reason you need the session ID for is for the context of the conversation. We're not using it much in our Watson assistant, but you may have an assistant where it needs to know what the person was talking about 2 or 3 sentences back.
Sure.
So that way, the session ID is how we can keep track of that context and know which conversation it's in. And with the free tier, that session ID only lasts for 5 minutes. So what I have here is I basically have the get session, but I try to send the message, but if it fails, because it didn't have, I guess the session timed out, it's going to just get the session again. And then once it gets the session again, it's going to send the message again. So we get the session and then we send the message. And then once we send the message, we basically handle the response. And here's if we get any type of error right now, what it's doing is just displaying it in the chat like you saw before, saying, please try again later, but we can probably do better error handling if people want to go ahead and tackle that. But basically what we do is we take the response, which is a JSON that you saw from Henry, and we take that and we send it to the add message, which is basically going to add it to the view. So add message, let's go to, so right here. So add message just takes the messages, it just loops through them and sets the text parameter, and it has a from input. And the only reason I'm doing from input is to know if it's a response from the server or from yourself. That way we can show them in different colors and on different sides when you're chatting, so you know which message came from the server and which one came from you. And then we basically call set messages with that new message, and with the new messages appended with the rest of the messages. And when you call set messages, it just goes ahead and updates the view, which is basically cycling through all the messages and adding it to the screen. So if I go back to here, let's restart it. All right, and if we go into the chat, okay, so then that's why you see if it's a message from you, it put it on the gray on the right, message from the server response. But as I type in new question, let's try this again. All right, it worked. Hey, I didn't change anything. Yeah, very good. All right, so when I typed in the where is milk, it comes back with that response and it puts it in here. And we have the location information, or if the person didn't put a location information, we just put their contact. So if I click on that location information, it's actually going to take me to that as well in the map.
Nice.
So I can see where that is. Yep. So that the chat is probably one of the more complicated screens in there. The other screen we already saw is the home screen. And the home screen is a bunch of text and a couple buttons here.
Sure.
So we just lay it out with the text, the scroll view, so I can scroll, and then the images and the text blocks. I have a loading screen, but we actually never see it because it doesn't take too long to load. So
because you write clean code, Va. You don't need a loading screen.
Because it's not pulling too much from the server. I only got like 3 items in there. But for people who do need loading screens, this is right now, all I'm doing is so I can see a loading screen is I usually typically change this to like 10 seconds or 2 seconds or whatever. So you can that way see the loading screen. Yeah. But this is where you would want to do anything that you want to do in the background before the screen fully loads. You would do it here and then set the loading screen to false, so then it can go ahead and continue to the next screen. The loading screen right now is just showing loading with an image. Okay. And then the map screen, I'll actually get that to afterwards because the map is a little different. So then we have the add screen where basically that's just adding the resource. And again, we have a scroll view, and then we have the text. And if we look at the add screen here.
So Va, would you say this is a pretty good React Native starter app for somebody to copy and start banging on if they wanted to build their own React Native app with an Express backend?
Yes, definitely, because we make use of multiple of the navigator. We make use of the tab navigation, so if you wanted to do tabs, or the stack navigator if you wanted to do stacks. And then we show forms, so if you wanted to add a form.
Yeah, you have forms. You have chat integration, and yes, you have a map.
And actually the map, we'll get into that. I'm adding the map using a web view component, and that's another way of adding screens where you basically build just a regular HTML, CSS, and then you inject it onto the screen. So they have multiple screens and multiple pages to view and get an idea on how to add it to their React Native or mobile application. And I'm not using anything here that's iOS native or specific. So this should be able to transition or get it running into Android with minimal changes or updates to it, or as a web application.
Awesome.
Yeah, so here's the form. We just have a text field and we have a picker, so you can pick the different type, whether it's food, help, or other.
Ammo.
We have the quantity field, which is just a regular text input field. So we have multiple text input fields. But then we have the location, which is showing us a checkbox, so you can have checked and unchecked. So if I hit the checkbox, it's actually going to use the location information, ask the OS for the location information, and just populate that in there. Or if I wanted to, I can just go ahead and put just a regular address like you saw in that chat, where the person just had a street address. So that's just handled in the section here where you do the current location. And if I come back up here, so, and again, I have my states here, which is the item state, which is the item you're filling out, the location information, and then the position, which is your current position. So your current position will be set to whatever the location preference you have. And set the user location, I actually just make an API call to the here location services, which we can look at afterwards to make the API call. And then the edit screen, which is basically just another it's the same example as the add page, but it just pre-populates it and adds 2 additional buttons up there where you can update and edit. And when you click on update, it just sends an update request to the server with the new information you filled in. And if you hit delete, it just sends the delete information to the server with the ID of the item you're trying to delete. And then we have the my, which is just basically your list of items, which is just basically a list here. So it makes a query for all your specific items. And then it'll go ahead and take those items and just list them here. And you see all we're doing is just using a flat list to go ahead and list them. And we add a bunch of CSS to make it look the way it does.
You're making me way too excited to go build a native app.
Would you believe if I told you this is my first React Native app?
Yeah, but it still looks fun.
Yeah. Right. So I'm sure there's a lot of improvements in there for people to do.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's the search page, where it just basically has the two search buttons. The search button, which has the search and the two fields that you can go ahead and put in. And then once it searches, it just again uses the flat list to just fill it up with the items that comes back from the server. Now, one thing Henry mentioned earlier is, let me go back to the utils, is he mentioned about we're using the ID for the authentication. So all we're doing is just getting the device ID and then using that for a unique ID. So an improvement would actually to add an authentication service to it, so people can actually authenticate rather than using the device ID. But that's basically what we're using for the unique ID of the application. And the only other screen left is the map to go over real quick. So let's go back to here. Whoops. Search assumption so I can get to the map screen. Right. So now the map screen, unlike the other screens, which are just basically React Native components, the map screen, if we go back to the map screen here, if you see what the map screen does is it loads a web view, and then in the web view, I just give it a URI. And the URI I give it is basically an HTML file with the here API key, so it can load the map. So in here.
Is a web view just like a React version of a frame?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And here is basically now it's just regular HTML and CSS. And the only reason I did this is one, to just add another type of different screen so people can see web views, stack, and all the other things. And the other option is here, I couldn't find any here React components, and I didn't have a time to create one. So I just went ahead and just used the web view as well.
So does that mean that the map is a bit of a dead end? Like are there any buttons you can click on the map that then go back into the app?
Yep. It's actually, there's communication between the actual app and the view. So let me go here. So for example, these buttons here, I can click on here, and it's actually going to go back to the app and ask the app to search for all the food items. And then it's going to come back and list all the food items. So the way that happens is, when we create a web view, here's the web view. So I'm going to keep this one open, and then open the web view right beside it so we can take a look. Okay. So what happens here is we actually set up communication between so whenever we want to send a message to the web view, we just call the send message, and it's just going to basically run a JavaScript that sends the message. Basically, it's just using message event handling between the app and then the JavaScript page. So that's how it goes ahead and sends the information. And on the web view source of it, we basically have an on message. So it adds an event listening to the event message. So when it gets an event message, it'll go ahead and do something on the map page when the message is received. And then we have the send message, which you can go ahead and send message. You just do React Native web view post message, and you send message back to the web app. And that's how you do the communication between the two. So you can get information from the app to the map, or from the map back to the app.
That's awesome. That's awesome that you have that two-way communication.
Yep. And that's basically it for the app. Let me just take a quick look to see if there's anything else in here that I missed. So I went over this. Oh, yeah, real quick. I guess I can show you the icons that I mentioned. So the icons, like I mentioned, there's just another SVG. So for example, the map icon that you see. Well, actually, I'm not even displaying the map icon. Like the donate icon that you see here, or the chat icon and the search icon. They're just basically CSV components, CSV that I just turned into React Native components. And that's just using the React Native SVG library. And you just pass in, you just write your regular CSV, and then it becomes a component that you can go ahead and throw on the page. So if I go back to here, you can just throw it on the page. Just the donate icon is going to pull that in, and that shows the icon in the tab screen. And let's see, so I covered that stuff. And yep, cover the screen images. And that's basically it. So like I mentioned, there's a lot of room for improvement here. And like we can make this into an offline first type of application, so that way it doesn't have to rely on the server connection all the time. It can just update and get the information as it needs it. Can also add authentication to go ahead and allow you to instead of just using the device ID. That'd probably be the first thing somebody should do, is get that authentication in there. And the other thing would be, so when it's doing the searches or trying to find information, keep it within a particular radius. We don't need to get information for somebody across the country at the moment.
Yeah, I wonder if you could show the architecture diagram again.
Yes, I can.
Because I think that's something we should talk about is
yes, right here.
Auth and what type of auth and who's authing to what. I mean, not current state, but like where final state, you know, what a good MVP auth story would be.
Well, I guess one would be so you can have your credentials, so the server can know who you are when you connect. So
Right.
you basically, the app would authenticate with the server by providing the credentials to the server, and then server, is this a person that's registered, or do they need to register? I guess you would need a registration page as well. If you're gonna start doing authentication, they would register with the server, and then on the cloud, you can go ahead and set up Cloud to store all the authentication information. And once the person's authenticated, then you can start showing them the information they're allowed to see, their information, and have the conversation and do the searches and queries as well.
Yeah. I also think that you need to have a flow. You need to have a registration flow. I think you could bring in
Yes.
IBM App ID.
Yes, that'd probably be the easiest.
But you're
way.
almost authenticating twice. Like first you're authenticating to the app, and then the app is authenticating to the mobile app, and then that's authenticating to the back end. Because every request, especially like a patch or a post or a delete, needs to be an authenticated request.
Mm-hmm.
Which also means your data model needs. I mean, Henry, does the data model already have like items are owned by users?
It does, yeah.
Yes.
It does, but at the moment, the ownership is done on that unique ID generated by the client. So it's in the API, but it's just not authenticated. Anyone can put any number.
Yeah, anyone with the app can delete anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, they'd have to. No, they'll only be able to delete their own stuff unless they can fake the ID of some other user. But because they can't query it either. But it's not. We never intended. We can build it as an auth layer, and that's you're correct. That's one of the things that should be added to this.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, do either of you or Chody want to give an overview of the cooperation starter kit, just for anybody who's joined late, or a nice little crisp couple minutes on what the goals of this was?
Yeah, Jody, do you want to do that, or I can do it if you like? I don't mind. So.
Either or. If you want to go ahead and go, and then give them the overview of the architecture, and then work backwards, or however you want to do it.
And then hand back to you for final kind of wrap up, which is
Mark?
So the purpose of here was how can we put together a starter kit which would help people build applications would help community help each other, and sharing information, sharing maybe you've got resources, food, medicines, masks, or maybe you can donate your time to go pick up people shopping, or as Jody mentioned at the start, maybe your help you can provide is go play classical music outside people's windows who are self-isolating. For instance, how would a community kind of exchange that information? Yeah, you could put it on Facebook and so forth, but those things aren't very local. So how could you build something that's local? So we put together a starter kit that did that. Had an architecture which is client server, mobile app, central kind of node server, show you how to store data in a NoSQL database, how you can integrate a chat interface with Watson Assistant, how you can combine the two and have the output of Watson actually go make queries into the database for what information might be available on the thing you're looking for, be it music or food or tomatoes or rideshare, whatever it happens to be, and pass that back to a client which is displayed, which was in this case an iOS one we showed. We kind of built it though that you could have different sorts of clients. You could have an SMS client. You could have someone brought up, can we make an Alexa interface for that? But you could do those things. And the idea was to have that kind of generalized architecture which could be deployed with some enhancements, as we have discussed, to go help you create solutions for your community. And that's what we're looking for people to do as part of Call for Code in this particular topic. Jody?
And really, just to add what Henry was saying, use your imagination. There are lots of opportunities here to connect your neighbors or different parts of your community with each other and let people help each other. It's very important to provide communication in any disaster, which a pandemic is a disaster. And this is one of the ways that technology can help. And again, you can use this to jumpstart your ideas and to kind of have something to start with and then add on to it as you see fit. You can use this for a variety of different types of connections that you want to make, whether it's connecting all of the local hospital and medical facilities with the different maker labs, or let's say that you have people that are they've got sewing kits from different stores, and they're doing what they can, connecting them with the people that need whatever it is they happen to be making, what kind of PPE. Or even, let's say that you're a community organization and you're trying to reach out to different community community individuals. And it could even be just simply people in your neighborhood or your apartment complex. How do you help people that locally? So your definition of local, run with that, whether it's your apartment complex or the city or your county as a whole. So there's so many different things you can do, and you can combine this starter kit with additional code patterns or code patterns from other starter kits, whether it be in the climate change challenge or other COVID starter kits as well. So you can kind of play around and mix and match all these different ideas, and it's a really great opportunity for everyone to give back, and it really helps everybody, and everybody's helping everybody right now.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, in closing, the Call for Code is a $200,000 grand prize distributed hackathon. Please do go for it. You can do bang Call for Code in the chat. You can get on our Slack and we can all help you out of it. Over the last couple of days, we've shown off the 3 different starter kits we have. There's a ton more code on our GitHub and our website, which is developer.ibm.com. I'll be back streaming on Monday. We'll have more streams coming up in the next couple weeks. And thanks so much for stopping by. Any final thoughts, team? Thanks so much to all our streamers today. Any final thoughts from Jody or Henry or Va? Big thanks in particular to Derek and to Pedro and to Dan for streaming earlier. Any final thoughts?
Just want to thank each one of these projects. There's a lot more people that put in their contributions in addition to the people that are streaming. So this was really a ton of us. I mean, and so it doesn't matter whether you're one developer or 20 as far as your project's putting together. So the idea is just making that effort to put something out there, and contributions are welcome to the starter kits. Thank you. And thank you to everybody that put in a ton of work over the last few weeks, especially everybody who put together starter kits. Thank you. It was really awesome work in a short amount of time. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, chat. We're going to raid this person. We'll see you all Monday. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
I think it takes a couple seconds to be ready to go, but we'll do it. And have a great weekend. Wash your hands. Hopefully take some time off if you can. See ya. Okay, now we're off. Thanks so much, you two. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jody.
Yep.
Thanks, Va. Talk to you soon.
All right. Yep.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks, Spencer.
Thank you. Oh, gosh.